mutates were capable. They shouldn't have been able to arrive here silently. Gu Qijue and Iris soon learned the answer to this question. They cautiously walked a distance through the underground base and saw some corpses. All these corpses had undergone extremely strange mutations. Gu Qijue and Iris also saw some laboratories within the underground base. They also saw many transparent glass columns in these laboratories. Inside the transparent glass columns were many mutants. Gu Qijue and Iris simultaneously looked in one direction. There was a mutant with two heads. One of the mutant's heads was already shattered, and most of its body was broken. However, that mutant was not completely dead, and it still retained some sanity. Gu Qijue approached cautiously and asked, "Who are you? What happened here?" The dying mutant did not answer Gu Qijue's question, but instead asked, "Who are you?" Gu Qijue took out his identity crystal card and showed it to the other party. "I am a commander of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster Civilization." Hearing this, the mutant let out a sigh of relief, pointed toward a nearby glass column, and then died completely. Gu Qijue was stunned, not understanding what he meant. However, as he approached the glass column, the Infinite Engine gave a warning. "Attention, unknown life form detected." When the Infinite Engine gave the warning, Gu Qijue clearly saw the unknown life form inside the glass column. If one person is too familiar with another, they might say, "I'd recognize you even if you were reduced to ash." After a moment of slight surprise, Gu Qijue recognized the unknown life form inside the glass column. This guy was none other than Arvis, the missing vice commander of the Blackstone Legion. Arvis used to be human, but now he had turned into a silver metal man. Gu Qijue tapped on the glass, trying to communicate with Arvis. Arvis, who had been sleeping in the glass column, became extremely agitated upon seeing Gu Qijue. He even frantically wrote in midair with his hand, "Get me out," although Arvis was still conscious and seemed to have no memory loss. Gu Qijue and Iris still prepared for battle before releasing him. Clang! Gu Qijue thrust his blood spear forward, instantly shattering the glass column. Whoosh! A large amount of solution flowed out from the glass column. Arvis, who looked entirely like he was forged from silver, or rather platinum, slowly walked out of the glass column. The power of the E-rank cosmic level peak was displayed clearly on him. Gu Qijue quickly realized that aside from his body being replaced with a platinum version, Arvis seemed otherwise unchanged. Even his personality hadn't changed much. He first cursed for a while, then immediately wanted to fight the Klein people desperately, as warlike as ever. Gu Qijue stopped Arvis and asked, "Vice Commander, Your Excellency, how did you end up like this?" Arvis said angrily, "Not long after I entered the ground battlefield, I was captured alive by the Klein people. Then I, along with many others, underwent biological modification by the Klein people. 319, Fierce Attack on the F-19 Base, Killing Machines. Chapter 318, Fierce Assault on F-19 Base, Killing Machine, Arvis. This hot-blooded young man had extremely bad luck in the Iron Cage battlefield. The first time he entered the Iron Cage battlefield, he was captured by the Klein people for biological modification. Although Arvis was now glittering with golden light, like a noble and luxurious platinum sculpture. No matter how you looked at it, he was extremely extravagant and had an excellent appearance. However, if he had a choice, Arvis probably wouldn't want to turn into this strange appearance. Gu Qijue pondered for a moment and said, "Let's go to the base above first. Then we'll figure out a way to help you recover." Hearing this, Arvis decisively shook his head. "I don't want to recover in a short time. Even if I do recover, I must be able to switch between two forms. If I can't switch between two forms, then I won't recover." Arvis was very pragmatic, although his current appearance wasn't as handsome and dashing as before. He had become stronger. He used to be an F-rank cosmic level warrior. Now, he was an E-rank cosmic level peak warrior. The price he paid was merely a change in appearance. Gu Qijue didn't expect Arvis to be willing to maintain this peculiar appearance. Since Arvis was willing, there was no need for him to say more. He directly said to the Golden Lion King warriors, "Take all the equipment and data that can be taken from here." Hearing the order, the many Golden Lion King warriors all spoke in unison. "Yes, Your Excellency, the head of state." Then, the many Golden Lion King warriors began to get busy in this huge hall. The Klein people's most formidable technology seemed to be biological modification technology. Other star cluster level civilizations, and even the Silver Flame Superstar Cluster civilization, were far behind. If these experimental instruments and numerous test subjects were all taken back for research, there might be some gains. Gu Qijue didn't intend to create strange monsters, but if the people of the Infinite Empire were transformed into monsters, it was still necessary to understand the Klein people's biological modification technology and then transform them back. Individuals like Arvis, who had extremely strong adaptability and were incredibly pragmatic, were, after all, a minority. In this hall, there were a large number of experimental devices and numerous glass columns. Many things Gu Qijue, Arvis, and Iris didn't recognize, but it didn't matter. They would take everything back first, and there would be plenty of time to study them later. The Klein people at F-19 base apparently didn't know that someone had come to raid their home again. This was normal, after all. Wanting to raid F-19 base was truly not an easy task. Moreover, this area was the Klein people's advanced laboratory. Ordinary Klein warriors were probably not allowed to come to this place. As a result, Gu Qijue and the two others were busy here for a long time without anyone disturbing them. Since they weren't coming, Gu Qijue certainly wouldn't be polite with them. Almost all the devices in this place were taken away by Gu Qijue. After stripping everything bare, he, Arvis, Iris, and the many mechanical golden lions continued their operation. Outside, the Blackstone Legion's operation seemed to be all bark and no bite. Their attack on F-19 base seemed to have stopped at the Star Ring battlefield. If it weren't for the Azure Star Cluster civilization suddenly being annihilated by the Klein people, many people on the Star Cluster Alliance's communication channel would have been booing the Blackstone Legion again. At the same time, Gu Qijue had already led Arvis and the others to the second basement level of F-19 base. This place was heavily guarded by a large number of Klein warriors. Gu Qijue and his group were discovered by the defenders here shortly after their appearance. Gu Qijue decisively said, "Prepare for battle." Some of the Golden Lion King warriors, who had maintained their human form, instantly entered their mechanical Golden Lion state. A distinctive blood spear also appeared in his hand at this moment. Beside Gu Qijue, Iris took out the Holy Light Spear. Ready for battle, Arvis, after biological modification, had become a fighting machine. His form changed instantly. At this moment, Arvis was covered in silver armor, and a battle saber appeared in his hand. In the second basement level of F-19 base, a terrifying battle erupted. Arvis's previous combat power was also very strong, but it was clearly incomparable to now. The current Arvis had become a terrifying killing machine. On the battlefield, his combat power could be fully unleashed. If the mechanical Golden Lions could reach the E-rank cosmic level, then many mechanical Golden Lions should be on the same level as Arvis. Arvis's formidable strength made Gu Qijue ponder. How many such biologically modified bodies had the Klein people created like Arvis? However, this thought only flashed through Gu Qijue's mind. In the second basement level of F-19 base, the number of Klein people warriors was very large. Even he needed to fight seriously. Otherwise, he might encounter trouble. Problems on the second basement level caused anomalies on the first basement level, the ground base, and the Star Ring base. While Gu Qijue was fiercely attacking the second basement level, he also issued combat orders to the Blackstone Legion's combat units. Attention all warriors of the Blackstone Legion. I am Commander Gu Qijue. I am currently fighting on the second basement level of F-19 base. The rest of the Blackstone Legion, now concentrate your forces and fiercely attack the ground portion of F-19 base. Hearing this order, everyone in the Blackstone Legion was both surprised and excited. They clearly hadn't expected that Gu Qijue had already entered the F-19 base. While other combat units were still probing and hesitating, they could coordinate with Gu Qijue from inside and out. Under countless astonished gazes, the Blackstone Legion's combat units suddenly moved. Many Blackstone Legion warriors, at this moment, launched a fierce assault on the ground base of F-19 base, which had the strongest defenses. During this period, the most frequently discussed topic on the Star Cluster Alliance's communication channel was still the sudden demise of the Azure Star Cluster. However, the anomaly of the Blackstone Legion still attracted the attention of many people. For a time, many people focused their attention on the Blackstone Legion. They all wanted to know what the Blackstone Legion was going to do this time. Unlike the Blackstone Legion's previous special tactics, this time the Blackstone Legion merely concentrated its firepower and fiercely attacked F-19 base. Other than that, there were no other anomalies. After a period of observation, many people felt that the Blackstone Legion had made a wrong decision this time. Attacking the ground portion of F-19 base in the current situation was completely a thankless task. Of course, they wouldn't know that the Blackstone Legion commander, Gu Qijue, had already broken into the F-19 base, and was engaged in a fierce battle with the Klein people on the second basement level. 320, super strong base shield, two-headed Klein, Gu Qijue led the Blackstone Legion, campaigning across the land and winning every battle. He already possessed incredible prestige within the Blackstone Legion. When he gave the order this time for the Blackstone Legion to concentrate its forces and fiercely attack the F-19 base. Essentially, everyone in the Blackstone Legion mustered all their strength to launch the fiercest sustained attack on this base. But no matter how they attacked, the F-19 base remained impregnable. The powerful energy shield, like an indestructible barrier, completely blocked them outside. When other legions encountered this situation, they would choose to retreat. Reasonably, the Blackstone Legion should have made the same choice. But this time, everyone was clearly baffled by the Blackstone Legion's confusing actions again. Boom, 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 boom. Rumble, a massive, overwhelming barrage of missiles and laser cannons continuously bombarded the F-19 base. Under the bombardment of countless missiles and laser cannons, although the base appeared unharmed, their energy reserves were rapidly depleting. Furthermore, the base itself being attacked caused many Klein people to panic and lose their composure. After all, their energy shield was not truly invincible. Once the energy shield's power was exhausted, the large number of enemies outside could quickly rush into the base. If this had happened during normal times, the Klein people could have dispatched a large number of combat troops to defend against the enemy outside. But this time was different. Gu Qijue had created a situation where the fighting was centered inside. They had to deal not only with the enemies outside, but also with the enemies inside the base. The enemies outside the base were not easy to handle, but the enemies inside the base were even harder to deal with. This group of enemies seemed fundamentally unkillable. No matter how many reinforcements were sent into the battlefield on the second basement level, none returned. This forced the commander of the F-19 base to make a painful choice. F-19 base, combat conference room. The base commander looked around, then decisively ordered, 15 minutes, take everything you can, then abandon this base. In the conference room, the expressions of the other Klein warriors kept changing. In the past, they were the ones chasing the warriors of other civilizations. This time, the roles were reversed, and they had become the ones fleeing. A Klein person with two heads had no intention of escaping at this moment. If you want to retreat, go ahead, I will defend the base to the death and await reinforcements. This person was called Sangtu. He was originally a pureblood Klein person with only one head, but he felt one head wasn't enough. So he underwent biological modification. The result of the biological modification was that even with two heads, it still wasn't enough. After all, two pig brains put together wouldn't lead to a better decision. After Sangtu spoke, the commander smiled and ignored him. Because when they fled, they needed someone to attract the enemy. If everyone ran away, they might be chased down relentlessly, which would be extremely troublesome. The commander of this base was named Luoya. Luoya said during the meeting that they would prepare to evacuate in 15 minutes. In fact, he fled immediately 1 minute after the meeting concluded. He needed not only Sangtu to cover his retreat, but also others to cover his retreat. The most valuable item in this base was on his starship. As long as he took this item away, whether others lived or died didn't matter. Luoya's vessel instantly entered spatial jump status and fled the F-19 base. The detectors of all the legions outside knew that someone had fled, but they didn't know who had fled, or why the person was fleeing. While Luoya was escaping, Sangtu, wearing armor, personally went to the second basement level to participate in the battle. Like Arvis, he was an E-rank cosmic level warrior. The difference was that he had two heads, while Arvis only had one. Originally, upon encountering a powerful enemy of this level, Gu Qijue would have needed to enter his third combat form, or even his fourth combat form to engage in battle. Now there was no need. Arvis's strength was comparable to Sangtu's. He let these two guys compete on the second basement level. Gu Qijue, meanwhile, took Iris and entered the first basement level. In this area, large numbers of Klein people, along with other creatures who had surrendered to the Klein people, were preparing to move out. A large amount of data, resources, technological equipment, and energy stones had all been packed up. Seeing this scene, Gu Qijue smiled and said to the crowd, "Thank you all for helping me package these things up." Everyone clearly knew that fighting had been continuous on the second basement level. Since Gu Qijue and his people appeared here, it meant that all the troops they had dispatched to the second basement level to fight had been defeated. Run! Although the Klein people were not afraid of death, they were not immortal. Nor would they die without protest. Before Gu Qijue could issue a combat order, these Klein people fell into chaos and began scattering and fleeing. Gu Qijue would not show mercy to his enemies. What the Klein people did to the Huenlin star cluster was 100,000 times more brutal than this. The vast majority of races on the Huenlin star cluster were exterminated. Gu Qijue ordered the mechanical golden lions, eliminate the enemy first, although these spoils of war were very valuable. But these items wouldn't suddenly grow legs and run away. He decided to eliminate the Klein people's technical staff first. The chaos on the first basement level triggered chaos in the ground level of the base. A large number of combat troops entered the first basement level to participate in the fighting. Other combat troops began packing up and fleeing. Some high-level base personnel, upon realizing Luoya had fled, they chose to flee immediately without any hesitation. Although there might have been a way if they held out, they truly couldn't hold on now. So they had no choice but to escape. This led to the F-19 base quickly becoming paralyzed shortly after falling into chaos. Even the energy cells powering the energy shield were taken away by some unscrupulous individuals. The energy shield, which had been relatively impregnable, shattered under the Blackstone Legion's relentless assault. Under countless shocked gazes, the Blackstone Legion took the lead and captured the city, immediately storming into the F-19 base. The sudden collapse of the Azure Star Cluster civilization had severely damaged the morale of the Star Cluster Alliance. The performance of the Blackstone Legion this time, however, restored some confidence among the masses. Perhaps the destruction of the Azure Star Cluster civilization was self-inflicted. The Klein people were not as formidable as everyone imagined. At least the Blackstone Legion, and some other elite forces, had proven time and again that these Klein people were not invincible. As the entire F-19 base descended completely into chaos, a large number of valuable items were collected by Gu Qijue. Gu Qijue and Iris achieved remarkable results with this surprise attack. They had successfully chewed through a very tough bone on the Iron Cage battlefield. 321, another miracle? Second-class Earl, this was a small step for Gu Qijue, Iris and the Blackstone Legion, but a giant leap for the Star Cluster Alliance. Since the F-19 base could be breached and destroyed, why couldn't other bases be? Although Gu Qijue's success could not be replicated. However, most combat units in the Star Cluster Alliance recovered some morale. In despair, all they truly needed was a glimmer of hope. Even if it was faint, when Gu Qijue, holding his blood spear, fought his way out from inside the F-19 base. Cameras on countless devices were focused on him at that moment, while others avoided the F-19 base. He chose to lead the Blackstone Legion in attacking the F-19 base. Later, when large numbers of combat units followed suit and entered this battlefield, his Blackstone Legion launched an assault on the ground base with the strongest defenses. Although many details were still unknown to the public, there was one thing, however, that everyone knew. That was, under the assault of Gu Qijue and the Blackstone Legion, the Klein people's F-19 base had been utterly annihilated. Gu Qijue's combat operation once again placed him at the center of attention. He even immediately appeared on the Klein people's wanted list. Star Cluster Alliance. Communication channel. The communication channel had been lively before, but now it was boiling over again. Commander Gu Qijue is incredible, he actually did it. Truly formidable, the F-19 base is the first Klein people base to be destroyed on the Iron Cage battlefield. So, the question is, how did Commander Gu Qijue's elite units manage to enter the F-19 base? Everyone was discussing heatedly. Gu Qijue and the Blackstone Legion became the hot topic of conversation. Compared to the onlookers of the Star Cluster Alliance, the various Star Cluster civilizations were analyzing the Blackstone Legion's combat performance and results. They then discovered that the miscellaneous equipment used by the Blackstone Legion had actually achieved incredible results. Vermilion Bird Star Cluster. Chief Executive Hall. Head of State Salisbury was waiting for weapons expert Hanzai to come and report the results and situation of the battle. Hanzai did not keep Salisbury waiting. The moment she received the results, she rushed into the Chief Executive Hall. Your Excellency, the Head of State. The results are in. The Blackstone Legion's current weapons and equipment performed exceptionally well on the battlefield. The overall combat effectiveness of the Blackstone Legion has increased by several percentage points compared to before. After hearing this, Salisbury nodded and immediately initiated communication with Gu Qijue. Inside the Chief Executive Hall, many high-ranking officials secretly gasped upon seeing this. Gu Qijue, currently only an F-rank cosmic warrior, was already so highly sought after. When he reaches the D-rank cosmic level, he is highly likely to secure a position as vice head of state. When he becomes a C-rank cosmic level powerhouse, he might even become a future head of state of the Vermilion Bird star cluster. Of course, neither Han Zai nor head of state Salisbury, nor the other vice heads of state or other officials of the Vermilion Bird star cluster, none of them knew that Gu Qijue was no longer planning to continue working for them. In a little while longer, he would go to the Azure Star Cluster civilization and become a local emperor. Aboard the Emperor starship, Gu Qijue was not surprised to receive another communication request from head of state Salisbury. Compared to his previous actions, this operation required a great deal of effort and substantial cost. The Golden Lion King warriors are extremely powerful, but they are very expensive to maintain. Every time they fight, they consume vast quantities of energy stones. If it weren't for the fact that he could essentially sustain war through war with every operation, then even if these mechanical golden lions were powerful, he would have to keep them shelved. Salisbury's holographic projection appeared before Gu Qijue, and she spoke straightforwardly. "Commander Gu Qijue, you did exceptionally well this time. Although your military merits still fall somewhat short, but taking into account your consistent outstanding performance, I have decided to use the head of state's special privilege to promote you to second-class honor count of the Vermilion Bird star cluster." Like most other star clusters, the Vermilion Bird star cluster divides each rank of nobility into first class and second class. However, even being a second-class honor count is highly impressive. This means he essentially has a long-term meal ticket in the Vermilion Bird star cluster. As long as the Vermilion Bird star cluster company doesn't go bankrupt, he will always live in luxury. Not only him, but his descendants can also inherit the title of second-class honor count in perpetuity. If this were before, Gu Qijue would have been very happy. Now, however, that is not the case. In a while, he will establish himself as king, so he naturally doesn't need to be interested in the Vermilion Bird star cluster's nobility titles. Of course, he was still interested in the benefits associated with the second-class honor count. After all, it was an astronomical amount of resources, and there was no reason to refuse free gains. When he first became a first-class honor viscount, he gained substantial benefits. The benefits he would receive this time were clearly much greater than before. After head of state Salisbury bestowed the benefits upon him, she began to talk about serious matters. "Commander Gu Qijue, you previously optimized the configuration of the Blackstone Legion's weapons and equipment. For the immediate future, could you also perform a corresponding optimization configuration for the weapons and equipment of some of the Vermilion Bird star cluster's regular combat units?" Gu Qijue said without hesitation. "No problem. This was actually a good assignment. During the procurement and configuration of equipment, he could establish friendships with many people. Of course, when he went to the Azure Star Cluster civilization, he wasn't planning to poach the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster Alliance's personnel. He couldn't keep milking the same cow, or he would run it dry. When he goes to the ruins of the Azure Star Cluster civilization to rebuild civilization and resist the Klein people, he will be a hero to the entire Star Cluster Alliance. At that time, the entire Star Cluster Alliance should provide him with a certain degree of support. After destroying the F-19 base, the Blackstone Legion made a huge profit. Having overfulfilled their combat mission, they could return to the Blackstone Legion base for a long period of rest. While the Blackstone Legion rested, Gu Qijue began configuring weapons and equipment for some of the Vermilion Bird star cluster's regular combat units. To his surprise, Iris continued to stay by his side, acting as the ambassador of the Dragon God star cluster. This made him suspect that the Dragon God star cluster might be looking for a live-in son-in-law. Of course, his goal of becoming the local emperor in the Huenlin star cluster would not be shaken, even though Iris was indeed very beautiful. While Gu Qijue was contemplating matters related to his development in the Huenlin star cluster, another terrifying incident occurred. The rear territories of the Silver Flame Superstar Cluster civilization were actually raided by the Klein people. Approximately 1/5 of their star domain was even occupied by the Klein people. This caused everyone in the Star Cluster Alliance to become anxious once again, as even the Silver Flame Superstar Cluster civilization, their big brother, had suffered a setback this time. 322, plans unchanged. Preparing for promotion to rank E, the Star Cluster Alliance once again plunged into a high-pressure, tense atmosphere. The Star Cluster Alliance's confidence in confronting the Klein people stemmed from two aspects. Firstly, the Star Cluster Alliance had a numerical advantage, with 50 star clusters participating in the encirclement and suppression of the Klein people. Secondly, the Silver Flame Super Star Cluster Civilization, the elder brother, led the charge. At its most illustrious and prosperous, the Silver Flame Super Star Cluster Civilization was an extremely powerful universe-level civilization. Even though it was now in decline, it was still a super star cluster civilization. Under such circumstances, everyone naturally dared to confront the Klein people. Although the Klein people were very powerful and terrifying, they were once defeated by the Silver Flame Super Star Cluster Civilization. Now, times had changed. The Klein people first destroyed the Azure Star Cluster Civilization, and then invaded the Silver Flame Super Star Cluster Civilization. They also occupied nearly 1/5 of the Silver Flame Super Star Cluster Civilization's territory in a very short time. This forced everyone in the Star Cluster Alliance to take them seriously and re-examine this powerful opponent with caution. The original Star Cluster Alliance was also upgraded to the Silver Flame Alliance. The remaining 49 members of the Star Cluster Alliance, along with the Silver Flame Super Star Cluster Civilization, were all members of the Silver Flame Alliance. To deal with the formidable enemy that was the Klein people, all parties would cooperate more closely going forward. Black Stone Base, Commander's Lounge. Gu Qijue had originally planned to go to the ruins of the Azure Star Cluster Civilization after some time to rebuild order. With such a sudden change, his next move needed to be discussed. His discussion partner was Tian Li. At this moment, Tian Li's holographic image had appeared opposite him. After seeing Tian Li, Gu Qijue asked, "Have you received the latest news?" Tian Li nodded at the words. "Yes, but this matter doesn't have a very significant impact on us. In fact, no matter whether the battle between the Silver Flame Alliance and the Klein people ends in victory or defeat, our occupation of the Azure Star Cluster Civilization will be beneficial. If the Silver Flame Alliance ultimately wins, we can occupy the Azure Star Cluster and seek greater development. Conversely, if the Silver Flame Alliance is defeated, the Azure Star Cluster will be far from the center of the conflict at that time. If the Azure Star Cluster offers no profit, or if the income outweighs the expenditure, the Klein people will not attack us. It must be said that the destruction of the Tianyuan Star Cluster was extremely regrettable. They possessed a large number of top talents, and Tian Li was an elite among them. He not only understood technology and engineering but also strategy. His few words just now were very insightful. The war between the Star Cluster Alliance and the Klein people could only have two outcomes: victory or defeat. If the Star Cluster Alliance wins, the Infinite Empire, which occupies the Azure Star Cluster, can usher in new development with other Star Cluster civilizations. If the Star Cluster Alliance is defeated, the Azure Star Cluster, which has already been swept clean by the Klein people and has basically no value, under normal circumstances, it would not become a target for the Klein people. The Klein people generally do not do things that offer no benefit. Although some unexpected events occurred, Gu Qijue and Tian Li decided, after discussion, to proceed with the original plan. After some time, they would lead the Infinite Legion into the Azure Star Cluster. If the Infinite Legion could gain a foothold in the Azure Star Cluster, that would naturally be for the best. If the Klein people turned their attention to the Infinite Legion, then the Infinite Legion would defend if they could and retreat if they couldn't. After all, the Azure Star Cluster was not originally theirs, so not being able to hold it would not be a significant loss. While Gu Qijue began to plan for the Azure Star Cluster, all the resources of the entire Azure Star Cluster were rapidly exploited by the Klein people. The Klein Galaxy Battlefield and the Silver Flame Super Star Cluster Battlefield were treated as the main battlefields by the Klein people. As for other places, the Klein people basically cleaned them out and left directly. Even if Gu Qijue led a portion of his warriors into the areas plundered by the Klein people at this time, as long as he didn't oppose the Klein people, it was very likely that the Klein people would ignore him. However, the time was not yet ripe, and Gu Qijue was not planning to leave the Blackstone Legion for now. After Gu Qijue ended his call with Tian Li, he began to use the Infinite Engine to equip the regular forces of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster with weapons and equipment. This task could be entirely completed by the Infinite Engine itself, so while the Infinite Engine was doing this, his attention was focused on the Golden Lion King treasure map. The best Infinite Legion should be composed of Golden Lion King warriors, but unfortunately, He didn't even have 10,000 Golden Lion King warriors, let alone 10 million. Currently, he only had 3,000 Golden Lion King warriors, normally. Other treasure locations of the Golden Lion King should still contain Golden Lion King warriors. It was even possible that there were devices for manufacturing Golden Lion King warriors. But where the other Golden Lion King warriors and the devices for manufacturing them were located required Gu Qijue to analyze himself. This kind of thing was difficult to analyze, because it was entirely about guessing the Golden Lion King's thoughts, guessing how he viewed these things. Gu Qijue held the positioning teleportation star chart, which was the Golden Lion King treasure map, and looked at it carefully for a while, but he still couldn't fathom the Golden Lion King's intentions. Although he really wanted to obtain more Golden Lion King warriors and even the equipment to manufacture them. For now, he had no good way. All he could do was go to the Golden Lion King's treasure locations one by one to search for these things. Even if he couldn't get Golden Lion King warriors, getting other things left by the Golden Lion King would also be good. However, before the next departure, he could still digest all his previous gains. He had already accumulated a large amount of good stuff. After he became a second-class honorary Earl of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster, he received a large number of rewards. For the next period, he could continue to improve his strength. In addition, he could also use the Infinite Engine to create some war machines. The war machines currently manufactured by the Infinite Engine were slightly inferior to the mechanical Golden Lions. But compared to the war machines of other star cluster-level civilizations, and even super star cluster civilizations, they still had an advantage. After making up his mind, Gu Qijue began to do so. His current strength was F-rank cosmic level. This time in his cultivation, he planned to raise his strength to E-rank cosmic level. The entire universe would only become more unsafe in the future. Strength and influence were the foundations for survival in troubled times. Although the attention of the Star Cluster Alliance members was basically focused on the recent situation of the Silver Flame Super Star Cluster Civilization and the Azure Star Cluster Civilization, there were still many eyes watching Gu Qijue and his Blackstone Legion. However, Gu Qijue and the Blackstone Legion were just as before. After shining brightly, they entered a long period of recuperation again. 323 cluster remnants, blue probe at the Blackstone base. Everyone in the Blackstone Legion was diligently cultivating. This time was different from before. Besides cultivating, the members of the Blackstone Legion couldn't do anything else, because their commander had already begun dedicated cultivation for a breakthrough. Gu Qijue clearly wouldn't end his cultivation anytime soon to lead the others out to cause trouble, since they had nothing else to do. The rest of the Blackstone Legion could only cultivate as well. Gu Qijue's actions forced Iris, who had been secretly observing him, to choose to leave. If Gu Qijue had continued leading the Blackstone Legion to fight battles across the land, she certainly could have stayed to observe. But now that Gu Qijue was staying at the Blackstone base with the Blackstone Legion members to cultivate and improve, there was no need for her to remain. Watching Gu Qijue and the Blackstone Legion cultivate held no value for Iris. In the Huenlin Star Cluster, Hope Star was a relatively remote planet within the Huenlin Star Cluster. This planet was quite far from its star, so its temperature was extremely low. It was difficult for life to emerge on such a planet, and indeed no native life had appeared on this one. However, refugees from the Huenlin Star Cluster were gathering toward this planet. The leader of these civilization remnants was named Zhao Mengfei. Zhao Mengfei was initially just the commander of a regular combat unit in the Huenlin Star System, when the Klein people appeared from various places and began looting and slaughtering the beings of the Huenlin Star Cluster. Most beings in the Huenlin Star System, and most excellent commanders, died in battle. Only Zhao Mengfei was comparatively lucky during the crisis. She successfully led a group of people to break out. They arrived on a lifeless planet and named it Hope Star. Under Zhao Mengfei's leadership, they modified the planet. As time passed, more and more survivors were rescued and brought to this location. Because the number of survivors was quite large, they quickly modified another planet next to Hope Star. This planet was named Survivor Star. Hope Star was far from its star, resulting in huge temperature differences between day and night, and extremely cold planetary temperatures. The situation on Survivor Star was slightly better. This planet was closer to its star and warmer, but it contained a large number of volcanoes. If they had other options, most people would likely not choose to live in such an environment. But there was no alternative. If they didn't live on this planet, they wouldn't have a better place to settle. Their remaining technology could only modify a planet to a certain extent, although Survivor Star had many volcanoes and the living environment was extremely harsh. After a period of modification, however, it was barely habitable. The remnants of the Huenlin star cluster were increasingly gathering on Survivor Star and Hope Star. Although their numbers were growing, they could see no hope. The star region they were in was severely lacking in resources, making it a poor location to rebuild a civilization. If they couldn't find a way to acquire more resources, their civilization might be permanently trapped on the planet. Currently, utilizing the legacy of the Huenlin star cluster, they could still engage in interstellar travel. But if they merely consumed their existing resources, they might eventually lose the ability to even leave the planet. Just as the remnants of the Huenlin star cluster were filled with worry, they encountered something even more terrifying. A space probe actually landed on Hope Star. Zhao Mengfei, the leader of the Huenlin star cluster remnants, immediately went to investigate. After Zhao Mengfei appeared, a holographic image also manifested in front of the space probe. This holographic image belonged to Tian Li. He had previously speculated that survivors of the Azure Star Cluster civilization must still exist. He then dispatched many space probes into the Huenlin star cluster. Now it was proven that his judgment was correct. This place truly held many remnants of the Huenlin star cluster. After Tian Li appeared, he immediately said in a friendly manner, "Hello, I am an official of the Infinite Empire, which is subordinate to the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster, a member of the Star Cluster Alliance. My name is Tian Li. May I speak with your person in charge?" Tian Li was extremely excited. Once Gu Qijue finished his cultivation, he could present Gu Qijue with a great gift. Zhao Mengfei appeared opposite Tian Li with a degree of caution, asking, "What do you want to discuss with us?" Tian Li knew that Zhao Mengfei and the others were highly wary of him, but he didn't mind. He stated directly, "The Infinite Empire is preparing to construct a base in the Huenlin star cluster. We will provide you with assistance for survival, and at the same time, we hope you will join us in fighting the Klein people." Zhao Mengfei was a sensible person. She already had a general idea of what the Infinite Empire intended to do. This force named the Infinite Empire was clearly a gambler. While others were avoiding the Huenlin star cluster, they chose to place a bet and invest in it. The remnants of the Huenlin star cluster simply had no choice. Since the Infinite Empire had sought them out, they could only choose cooperation. Zhao Mengfei pondered for a moment and said, "We have an intimate understanding of the situation in the Huenlin star cluster. We can provide the Infinite Empire with intelligence, combat personnel, and productivity. What can the Infinite Empire do for us?" She laid out their bargaining chips, and at the same time, she wanted to see what kind of sincerity the Infinite Empire possessed. Tian Li was an intelligent man, and he believed there were definitely more survivors in the Huenlin star cluster. Therefore, even if it meant buying a dead horse's bones for 1,000 gold, he had to demonstrate sufficient sincerity. Tian Li quickly replied, "We can provide you with aid in 3 areas: materials, energy, and combat forces. We can provide the materials and energy you currently need to the maximum extent possible. In a while, the combat forces of the Infinite Empire will make your living environment much safer." This cooperation was easily achieved. Zhao Mengfei and the others had no choice but to accept, and Gu Qijue and the Infinite Empire also needed the natives of the Huenlin star cluster to provide intelligence. Therefore, while Gu Qijue was still cultivating, Tian Li had already mostly handled this matter. When he finished his cultivation, Tian Li would be able to directly hand over the results. Gu Qijue did not know that Tian Li was so capable. During this time, he was diligently cultivating. As long as the resources were sufficient, raising his rank faced no major obstacles or bottlenecks. After consuming a large amount of resources and time, Gu Qijue boosted his strength in one go to the E-rank cosmic level. This improvement consumed about 1/5 of the reward he received for becoming a second-class honorary earl. Although a lot of resources were consumed, it was all worth it. Furthermore, they shouldn't fear lacking resources, only lacking strength. Once strength was improved, acquiring more resources would become a very easy matter. 324, Game of Thrones, on the eve of the Legion's formation. After raising his personal strength to the E-rank cosmic level, Gu Qijue concluded this session of cultivation. As soon as he finished cultivating, he saw the email Tian Li had sent him during his session. After quickly skimming the email, Gu Qijue was immediately overjoyed. During his cultivation, Gu Qijue had actually found survivors of the Azure Star Cluster civilization. These people understood the Azure Star Cluster civilization better than anyone else. Furthermore, they could become the productive and fighting forces of the Infinite Empire. The foundation of the Infinite Empire, ultimately, lay in Emperor Star and Shenhuang Continent. However, Emperor Star and Shenhuang Continent combined did not have many people. The population issue was definitely a major problem for the Infinite Empire's development in the Huanlin Star Cluster. If they could find the survivors of the Huanlin Star Cluster and cooperate with them, the population problem could be solved to a great extent. This was not the only good news, just as Tian Li had previously predicted. The Klein people had indeed wiped the Huanlin Star Cluster clean and left. They had already used the Huanlin Star Cluster as a springboard to continue attacking the surrounding Star Cluster-level civilizations. This meant that Gu Qijue could now form an infinite legion and head to the Huanlin Star Cluster. Gu Qijue pondered for a moment and prepared to submit this application to the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster and the Star Cluster Alliance. It was likely that the Star Cluster Alliance would be very happy to see someone causing damage behind the Klein people's lines. Vermilion Bird Star Cluster. Chief Executive Hall. Salisbury received Gu Qijue's application. Those who saw the application, besides the female head of state, included 5 vice head of states. The expressions of the group were not very pleasant. After all, the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster's home territory was the battlefield against the Klein people. As a talent of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster, why was Gu Qijue not staying to fight in the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster, but instead running off to the ruins of the Huanlin Star Cluster? Gu Qijue, one of the vice head of states of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster, spoke angrily. This traitor, he should be arrested. Gu Qijue was currently burning with rage, utterly furious. In his view, Gu Qijue owed his current status entirely to the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster's support and cultivation. Without the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster, Gu Qijue would still be a local tyrant on the Shenhuang Continent. How could he have achieved what he has today? However, not all high-ranking officials thought like Gu Qijue. Regarding the help the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster provided to Gu Qijue and Gu Qijue's repayment to the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster, it was hard to say who owed whom. Moreover, Gu Qijue had only proposed the plan, he hadn't directly taken people and fled to the Huanlin Star Cluster. Since that was the case, everything was still negotiable. After a moment of silence, Hansen spoke, "I believe we can approve it and even place a bet. If the Klein people could suddenly attack and destroy the Huanlin Star Cluster, they could destroy the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster. Although there are joint forces from the Star Cluster Alliance on the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster battlefield, it would be difficult for the Klein people to achieve this. But who knows if the joint forces will always be present on the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster battlefield? At a time like this, it is necessary to leave some fallback options for the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster and preserve the spark." Pausing, Vice Premier Hansen continued, "In my opinion, the issue we need to consider now is the level of importance we place on this fallback option. Should we place a heavy bet, supporting Commander Gu Qijue's development in the Huanlin Star Cluster, while finding a way to firmly control Commander Gu Qijue and his troops? Or should we make a casual move, providing only general support and allowing Commander Gu Qijue to develop independently?" Salisbury and the others present were actually all insightful individuals. They had already considered parts of the situation before Hansen spoke. After Hansen clarified the matter, everyone, including Gu Qijue, began to think rationally. This matter was 50-50 for the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster. If the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster truly could not hold on in the future and needed to evacuate elsewhere, and if Gu Qijue developed well there, the people of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster would certainly have an extra path to survival. If the high-ranking officials and powerful figures of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster all went to the Huanlin Star Cluster, they could even rebuild civilization there. But what if the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster battlefield held, or even repelled the Klein people? Then the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster's investment in the Huanlin Star Cluster would lose much of its value. While others were still thinking, the head of state of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster, Salisbury, made a decision. The Vermilion Bird Star Cluster can provide limited support for such operations. Any commander, after receiving approval, may take a small number of combat troops and supplies to carry out such military operations. Regardless of future developments, we can maintain an alliance relationship with Commander Gu Qijue and the other commanders applying for these types of operations. Head of State Salisbury was highly capable. Since Gu Qijue already had this idea, Even if they disagreed, Gu Qijue might still flee one day. There was only one way to prevent Gu Qijue from running away, and that was to kill him. But killing Gu Qijue would bring no benefits to the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster. Head of State Salisbury's approach was to use a small investment for a large return, setting up arrangements everywhere. In any case, the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster would be unable to escape the mire of war and achieve greater development for a long time to come. Since that was the case, it was better to send capable commanders like Gu Qijue out to do some work. The Vermilion Bird Star Cluster could provide a certain degree of assistance to Gu Qijue and others. If the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster could not hold out in the future, they would have many fallback options. Conversely, if the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster survived the war, it would gain many developing allies. After the war between the Star Cluster Alliance and the Klein people concludes, the severely weakened Star Cluster-level civilizations will certainly be annexed. Wars between members of the Star Cluster Alliance are very likely to break out. Regardless of future trends, it is always beneficial for the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster to have more allies everywhere. Of course, these so-called allies might also become puppets of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster. Whether their development in various locations will become the wedding dress benefit of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster depends on their own capabilities. Given the foundation and capabilities of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster, most of the fruits of victory will obviously be plundered by the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster in the end. This is extremely cruel to Gu Qijue and others. However, there is no way around it. The game of power is just like this. They must either honestly develop within the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster and avoid such dangerous games, or they must possess enough confidence and capability to ensure that while they develop and build outside, they are not infiltrated or undermined by the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster. Just like the Infinite Legion that Gu Qijue is about to form, if the high-ranking officers of the Legion include secret agents from the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster, or if people from the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster occupy some critical positions within the Legion, then even if Gu Qijue commands and leads this Legion, the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster will still have enormous influence over it. If a Legion also has acts of power transfer, then during the power transfer, will the authority of the Legion be handed over to people from the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster? These matters are part of a very long-term strategy, and for the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster, such an arrangement is clearly without fault. 325, plans have changed. We're going to explore the Blue Star Cluster. A six-sided die has 6 faces, morality and cunning are just 2 of them. Gu Qijue wanted to go to the Huenlin Star Cluster to achieve greater development. The high-ranking officials of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster were willing to give him and others with similar ambitions such development opportunities. However, whether the forces they developed externally would truly belong to them in the end was debatable. The resolution from the high-ranking officials of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster quickly reached Commander Gu Qijue. After a brief thought, he understood some things. The high-ranking officials of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster allowed a portion of commanders to lead a small number of troops to develop externally. During this process, the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster would continuously provide them with assistance. Furthermore, the level of assistance from the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster would vary at different stages of their development. At first glance, this resolution seemed very beneficial to them. In reality, this resolution might not be that beneficial to them. The high-ranking officials of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster were clearly making a special kind of investment. Only a small fraction of these commanders who went to establish bases elsewhere would eventually grow. Among these growing legions, as long as the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster controlled even a small part, they could recoup their initial investment with interest. To take a step back, in case the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster ever fell, these extraterritorial bases, closely linked to the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster, could also serve as shelters for the beings of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster. It could be said that his application to the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster was indirectly rejected by them. His and Tian Li's idea was for him alone to receive support from the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster. Now, the high-ranking officials of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster had made such a resolution. Whether it was the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster or other star clusters, many people would certainly do the same. This time, Commander Gu Qijue's judgment was also completely correct. Not long after the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster's resolution was issued, other members of the Star Cluster Alliance obtained this news through various channels. For a time, Various star cluster level civilizations selected a portion of their elite troops and generals and began to expand their territory in the Huanlin star cluster. This was, of course, a very normal thing, much like an office worker who, after getting off work, discovers they can set up a stall by the roadside to sell snacks. Seeing their business thrive, within 2 or 3 days, countless people in the vicinity would follow suit. But if you were selling lithography machines, then basically no one would follow suit. Commander Gu Qijue had originally planned to monopolize the Huanlin star cluster, but with the Star Cluster Alliance messing things up like this, he had to consider his next move. While he was contemplating these matters, he received a communication invitation from the Silver Flame Super Star Cluster civilization. Commander Gu Qijue pondered for a moment and then accepted. Buzz, soon. A holographic image appeared opposite him. The person was wearing a black trench coat, and their appearance was quite weathered. As an official in the operations department of the Silver Flame Super Star Cluster civilization, the person was rather disheveled. After appearing, this person introduced himself. Commander Gu Qijue, hello, I am Han Tao, the 4th Department, head of the Operations Department of the Silver Flame Super Star Cluster civilization. Unlike the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster civilization, the Operations Department of the Silver Flame Super Star Cluster civilization had more than one department head. Commander Gu Qijue didn't know why Han Tao was here, but he politely said, Your Excellency Han Tao, hello. I am Gu Qijue. After he finished speaking, he waited for Han Tao to state his purpose. Han Tao indeed had no intention of wasting time. He directly said, The Silver Flame Super Star Cluster civilization would like to invite you to join us. Regarding the matter of the Huanlin star cluster, the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster was clearly not very generous. Since the high-ranking officials of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster were not generous, Commander Gu Qijue naturally had more options, although Commander Gu Qijue had been pondering whether to change his previous plan. After all, if a large number of Star Cluster Alliance combat troops appeared on the Huanlin Star Cluster, the Klein people would definitely not ignore it. However, Commander Gu Qijue only thought about it briefly before giving up the idea of joining the Silver Flame Super Star Cluster civilization. He could negotiate with the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster. He clearly couldn't do the same with the Silver Flame Super Star Cluster civilization. Next, he could try going to the Huanlin Star Cluster. If there was truly no room for development, it wouldn't be too late to return. Commander Gu Qijue immediately said, I currently have no intention of joining other civilizations. Hearing this, Han Tao and the others were completely unfazed. He smiled at Commander Gu Qijue and said, No matter. The doors of the Silver Flame Super Star Cluster civilization are always open for you. With that, Han Tao left directly. He didn't expect Commander Gu Qijue to join the Silver Flame Super Star Cluster civilization today. He only hoped that when Commander Gu Qijue found other places unsuitable for development in the future, he would think of the Silver Flame Super Star Cluster civilization. It must be said, his objective was achieved. The Silver Flame Super Star Cluster civilization was one rank higher than other Star Cluster level civilizations. Other Star Cluster civilizations were simply not comparable to the Silver Flame Super Star Cluster civilization. After Han Tao left, Commander Gu Qijue received another communication request from Tian Li. Commander Gu Qijue immediately connected and then saw Tian Li. Tian Li evidently already knew what the Star Cluster Alliance had done, so he got straight to the point and said, Your Excellency, the head of state, we can still go to the Huanlin Star Cluster next. Commander Gu Qijue casually said, If the Star Cluster Alliance dispatches a large number of combat troops to the Huanlin Star Cluster, the Klein people will definitely attack everyone in the Huanlin Star Cluster. Under such circumstances, entering the Huanlin Star Cluster would probably be very troublesome and not very safe. Tian Li nodded upon hearing this. Your Excellency, the head of state, that is indeed the case. However, in the short term, the Klein people should not launch an attack on the Huanlin Star Cluster. In fact, it's highly possible that the Klein people won't pay any attention to the people living on the Huanlin Star Cluster at all. The Klein people's actions are primarily for resources. If attacking the Huanlin Star Cluster offers no benefits, then under normal circumstances, they will not attack the Huanlin Star Cluster. Tian Li's view was very clear. Even though some changes had occurred, he still chose to go to the Huanlin Star Cluster. This time, Commander Gu Qijue didn't make a decision immediately. He pondered for a moment before looking at Tian Li and saying, Aside from the Huanlin Star Cluster, are there any other better places? Tianli shook his head upon hearing this. Your Excellency, the head of state, currently the Huanlin star cluster is our only option. Either go to the Huanlin star cluster to seek greater development, or stay in the Vermilion Bird star cluster and wait for changes. Tianli stopped speaking here. He could only offer suggestions. The final decision had to be made by Commander Gu Qijue. Commander Gu Qijue had initially been very keen to go to the Huanlin star cluster. But now, while the Huanlin star cluster was still the first choice, it was no longer the only choice. After thinking about it, Commander Gu Qijue immediately decided to use the positioning teleportation star chart to teleport there for an on-site inspection. What is learned from paper is shallow. One must practice to truly understand. 326. Cosmic Debris, the Lost Crystal Clan Civilization, what the situation in the Huanlin star cluster was really like. He would know once he went to see it personally. Gu Qijue thought so, and he acted accordingly, with the positioning teleportation star chart in hand. It was extremely convenient for him to go to many places. This item could transport him to the Huanlin star cluster, but unfortunately, neither the Huanlin star cluster nor its surroundings contained the Golden Lion King's hidden treasure location. If he went to the Huanlin star cluster, he wouldn't be able to kill two birds with one stone. Gu Qijue did not tell anyone about his trip to the Huanlin star cluster this time. Under the teleportation of the positioning teleportation star chart, his figure quickly appeared in a corner of the Huanlin star cluster. As soon as he appeared there, the Infinite Engine reacted. Notification, local universe remnant detected. The Infinite Engine had already provided Gu Qijue with many astonishing moments, but the notification it gave this time was still too exaggerated. What the Infinite Engine detected was none other than a universe remnant. He just didn't know if the local universe remnant referred to a remnant generated by the current universe, or a remnant left over from another universe. There is a hypothesis that the original universe was 11-dimensional or perhaps 10-dimensional. This 10-dimensional universe then tore apart, becoming a 4-dimensional universe and a 6-dimensional universe. If this hypothesis were true, then within the current 4-dimensional universe, it might be possible to find that twin 6-dimensional universe. Of course, Gu Qijue didn't know what exactly was going on this time. This notification was too astonishing, and he needed to check for more information before taking action. Gu Qijue asked the Infinite Engine, "What is a local universe remnant? We regret to inform you that there is no data regarding the local universe remnant in the database." The Infinite Engine's answer greatly surprised Gu Qijue. This was like many people having heard of the theory of relativity and being able to associate it with Einstein. But what the theory of relativity actually entailed, they didn't know, although the Infinite Engine could link the special object it found to the local universe remnant. However, the Infinite Engine didn't know what this local universe remnant actually was, since there were no useful clues. He could only send a mechanical golden lion to investigate. He could share the mechanical golden lion's vision. If this so-called local universe remnant turned out to be extremely dangerous, he would only lose one mechanical golden lion in the end. After making up his mind, Gu Qijue headed toward the spatial coordinates marked by the Infinite Engine. His plan was very cautious. But this time, an unexpected event occurred. After he arrived, the Infinite Engine actually changed again. Local universe remnant detected, attempting connection successful. Attempting entry into local universe remnant, buzz. The next moment, Gu Qijue felt his vision go black, then time, space, and everything ceased to exist. Around him, there was only boundless, endless darkness. Here, his consciousness was clear, but he could do nothing. After a long while, the Infinite Engine finally reacted. Infinite Engine restart successful, data updating. Please wait. Gu Qijue was stunned by this news. This local universe remnant was truly extraordinary. It directly forced his Infinite Engine to restart. The data the Infinite Engine needed to update this time was immense, 50 times the original data. This left Gu Qijue dumbfounded, as he couldn't do anything at the moment except wait for the Infinite Engine to update. Fortunately, the Infinite Engine's update speed was very efficient. Despite the massive amount of data, it would only take 3 days to complete the update. Gu Qijue had no choice but to wait patiently. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Infinite Engine data update complete. Your Excellency, the head of state. Welcome to the Crystal Clan Universe Remnant. After the upgrade and update, the Infinite Engine was clearly more intelligent. Gu Qijue immediately asked, "What does Crystal Clan Universe Remnant mean?" The Crystal Clan Universe Remnant is a fragment left behind after the death of the Crystal Clan Universe. Energy in the universe is limited. According to the second law of thermodynamics, the universe will die from heat death. The Crystal Clan universe is a universe that underwent the Great Rip after dying from heat death. The space Your Excellency, the head of state, is currently in is one of the many Crystal Clan universe remnants. Gu Qijue had certainly broadened his horizons this time. Not only living beings die, but universes die too. At this moment, he was on the corpse of a dead universe. Gu Qijue pondered for a moment and asked, "What can I do here?" Under the modification of Crystal Clan technology, this Crystal Clan universe remnant has become a safe and stable small space. The Crystal Clan hopes to become your ally and requests your help in reviving the Crystal Clan civilization. Gu Qijue asked, "How can I help revive the Crystal Clan civilization? We regret to inform you that there is no relevant data in the database." This answer from the Infinite Engine left Gu Qijue speechless. If even the Infinite Engine didn't know how to revive the Crystal Clan civilization, then he certainly wouldn't know. Fortunately, the Infinite Engine's database had been updated, and much of the previously missing data was now complete. Gu Qijue immediately began reviewing the brief history of the Crystal Clan universe. This segment of data was very comprehensive. The Crystal Clan civilization initially consisted of flesh and blood bodies, and were even carbon-based lifeforms. However, as time progressed and technology advanced, they gradually became mechanical lifeforms and then later became energy lifeforms. After becoming energy lifeforms, the beings of the Crystal Clan civilization achieved eternal life. Their scientists calculated the precise time of the Crystal Clan universe's death and then initiated a series of self-rescue plans. These self-rescue plans included migrating to other universes. Unfortunately, although Crystal Clan scientists knew that more than one universe existed and even found ways to enter other universes. However, they were unlucky. There were no other universes around the Crystal Clan universe. Therefore, even with cutting-edge theories and technology, their heroes had no place to display their prowess. Then, the Crystal Clan scientists devised a second plan. That was to convert the Crystal Clan from energy lifeforms into data lifeforms for preservation. After the Crystal Clan universe died from heat death, a Great Rip would occur at a certain point in time. During this process, a large amount of energy would be generated, causing the Crystal Clan universe remnants to appear in many places. Some of the Crystal Clan universe remnants stored Crystal Clan members in the form of data lifeforms. If these universe remnants fell into other universes, the Crystal Clan might be able to revive. However, it was obvious that the specific Crystal Clan universe remnant Gu Qijue found contained no Crystal Clan members. Besides these plans, the Crystal Clan civilization also had some unconventional plans. For example, creating a god and having him create a universe. Unfortunately, this task was too difficult, even though God's throat was hoarse from speaking. The process of creating the universe was still stuck at the step of "let there be light." 327, Energy Crisis, Strategic Mechanical Lifeforms. Gu Qijue found the Crystal Clan's history somewhat amusing and frustrating. Although he learned many things, he still didn't know the purpose of this special space. Fortunately, after the Infinite Engine upgrade was complete, he could now move freely within the Crystal Clan universe remnant. This place, after being modified by Crystal Clan technology, had become basically normal. Here, one could see a large number of robots in various materials. The Crystal Clan's luck was truly bad. If they had left some Crystal Clan data lifeforms here, they would have successfully revived. As a result, the Crystal Clan did not revive. Instead, the robots created by the Crystal Clan did, and they completed the transformation of the Crystal Clan universe remnant. When Gu Qijue appeared, a silver-white robot quickly approached. Then the Infinite Engine gave a prompt. "Aldington requests to learn your language and understand your basic information. Do you allow it?" Gu Qijue took a quick look, then nodded. After he agreed, this Crystal Clan robot quickly read his language and understood his basic information. Aldington was silent for a moment, then said very respectfully, "Your Excellency, the head of state, hello. I am Aldington. Your current identity is a friend of the Crystal Clan. Before the appearance of Crystal Clan life, you have absolute control over this Crystal Clan space. Your Excellency, the head of state, do you need us to do anything?" Gu Qijue didn't expect to stumble upon another good deal this time. Before the appearance of Crystal Clan life, he was in charge of this place. This strange restriction made him not want to search for Crystal Clan life at all. Of course, with the wisdom of the Crystal Clan, they would certainly not make such a foolish restriction. He would definitely know later that finding the Crystal Clan and cooperating with them would bring greater and more benefits. But those were future matters, for now. Gu Qijue wanted to know what this place could do for him. He pondered for a moment and asked, "Aldington, briefly introduce this place to me." Aldington nodded and then said, "No problem, Your Excellency. But first, I need to read information from the outside world to introduce it to you using terms from the outside world." In short, Aldington needed to know outside knowledge and then introduce it to Gu Qijue in terms he could understand. Gu Qijue nodded upon hearing this. Then the Infinite Engine transmitted a data packet to Aldington. Aldington quickly processed all the data in this data packet. Then it said to Gu Qijue, "Your Excellency, this space is equivalent to the territory of a superstar cluster-level civilization. However, due to extreme energy scarcity, many of our technological devices cannot be used. Our combat robots also cannot be awakened. Currently," Aldington told Gu Qijue a great deal of information. To summarize, it was 2 words: energy. Many times when problems arise, the parties involved will say, "It's not about money." In reality, it is about money. Aldington was much more straightforward. It very clearly told Gu Qijue, "This Crystal Clan space has many high-end, grand, and classy things, but without enough energy. Everything is useless. It's like an apple without an unlock password, just a brick." Aldington needed energy, and Gu Qijue was naturally willing to provide it to them. But the problem was that the amount of energy Aldington and its kind needed was simply too much. His meager savings were not even a drop in the bucket for Aldington and its kind. This made him want to rob all the Klein people, the Silver Flame Superstar Cluster Civilization, and all members of the Star Cluster Alliance. As long as there was enough energy, this Crystal Clan space could instantly become a top-tier superstar cluster power. Gu Qijue initially thought he had made a fortune and would once again make a huge profit. After understanding the true situation of this place, he realized that even the landlord had no surplus grain. This place was extremely scarce in energy. After careful consideration, Gu Qijue looked at Aldington and said, "I don't have enough energy to supply you. Do you have any solutions?" Aldington immediately shook its head. "Your Excellency, I am a housekeeper robot. Please wait a moment, I will awaken the strategic robot." With that, Aldington left the area. As it left, Gu Qijue naturally followed. Then he witnessed a scene that made him laugh and cry. Aldington came to a metal cabin and sat down. Then its energy core flew out of its body and into another robot's body within the metal cabin. That dormant robot was immediately awakened. Aldington apparently gave a copy of the previous data to this robot. After waking up, this robot walked directly towards Gu Qijue and saluted. "Friend of the Crystal Clan, esteemed head of state Gu Qijue. Hello, I am a strategic mechanical life form. My name is Eve. If Your Excellency cannot provide us with a large amount of energy, Your Excellency can take some items out to exchange for energy," Eve said, sending a list of items to the Infinite Engine. Gu Qijue immediately saw that this item list surprisingly contained a large number of weapons. These weapons ranged from F tier to SSR tier. However, all these weapons lacked energy cores. After purchasing these weapons, one would need to configure their own energy cores. Gu Qijue looked closely and then completely confirmed. These weapons were all masterpieces among masterpieces. The Crystal Clan truly lived up to its reputation as the sole overlord of the Crystal Clan universe. The things they produced and manufactured were indeed extraordinary. Gu Qijue planned to keep these items for himself. However, the energy problem of the Crystal Clan space also needed to be resolved. There wasn't absolutely no way to solve this problem. Gu Qijue immediately said to Eve, "I will provide you with some energy stones and materials. Can you produce corresponding items?" Eve immediately nodded. "We can produce corresponding items with the most energy-efficient plan." In its later stages, the Crystal Clan faced a very severe energy crisis, so their energy technology was extremely advanced. Gu Qijue immediately took out 1/10 of the materials and energy stones from the Infinite Engine's spatial warehouse. The plight of these Crystal Clan mechanical lifeforms was truly difficult. Mechanical lifeforms of Eve and Aldington's level even required a group of them to share one energy core. When Eve saw the large amount of energy stones, her eyes widened. If she were a human beauty, her current expression would be that of sparkling eyes. Eve said with immense joy, "Your Excellency, may I first create energy cores for my partners?" Gu Qijue nodded. "These materials and energy are a welcome gift. Feel free to use them." 328. Establish the core area, the Emperor Star Wandering Project. Gu Qijue hadn't expected the outcome. He tried to plant flowers, but they wouldn't bloom. Yet a casual willow branch grew into shade. He had meticulously planned the matter of the Huenlin star cluster for a long time, and Tian Li had also put in considerable thought. However, when he brought the matter up with the higher-ups of the Vermilion Bird star cluster, they tricked him. Originally, he wanted to go to the Huenlin star cluster alone and hog the benefits. The Vermilion Bird star cluster simply waved their hands and sent many people to this barren land to share the cake with him. Other star cluster-level civilizations followed suit, sending some commanders and combat troops to this location. Now that things had progressed this far, Gu Qijue was somewhat unwilling to be the scapegoat. The higher-ups of the Vermilion Bird star cluster were too cunning and truly unethical in this matter, but he hadn't expected that there would be a Crystal Clan universe remnant within an alternate dimension near the Huenlin star cluster, since no Crystal Clan lifeforms currently existed in the universe. As a friend of the Crystal Clan civilization, he possessed absolute control over the Crystal Clan universe remnant. After Gu, Qijue provided Eve and Oldington with some energy stones and materials. Eve and Oldington revived more mechanical lifeforms. More and more functions within this Crystal Clan universe remnant were sequentially activated. Of course, the energy Gu Qijue currently provided was still too little. The materials that Eve and Oldington could produce with these energy stones were extremely limited. While Eve and Oldington were busy everywhere, Gu Qijue also gained a certain understanding of the Crystal Clan universe remnant. At this point, he wanted to bring everyone from the Infinite Empire over. The Infinite Legion would build a base on the Huenlin star cluster to deceive others. The Infinite Empire, along with his true direct lineage, could develop within the Crystal Clan universe remnant. The matter of the Crystal Clan universe remnant must also be kept secret. Externally, he would just say that this was a stable alternate dimension. The technology of a star cluster-level civilization could find a ready-made, relatively stable alternate dimension, or even manufacture one themselves. There would naturally be no problem if he claimed to have found an alternate dimension. If no one cared or asked, he wouldn't even need to mention it publicly. Gu Qijue pondered seriously for a while and then made up his mind. The Outpost Star, the Emperor Star, and the Shenhuang continent. Next, he had to find a way to transfer all of them into the Crystal Clan universe remnant. Whether entering or leaving the Crystal Clan universe remnant, a key was required. So far, the only key was the infinite engine on his person. After figuring this out, Gu Qijue summoned Eve and Oldington. Eve and Oldington didn't know what instructions Gu Qijue had. After arriving, both respectfully waited for Gu Qijue to give his order. Gu Qijue wasted no time and said calmly, "Can you concentrate everything related to the Crystal Clan into a core zone? In the future, the Crystal Clan universe remnant will be divided into the outer ring, inner ring, and core zone. Everything related to the Crystal Clan will be located in the core zone, and at the same time, we must seal off the news that this is the Crystal Clan universe remnant. I will transfer my forces into the Crystal Clan universe remnant for development and construction." After Gu Qijue finished speaking, Eve said, "No problem, Your Excellency, the head of state. However, we will need a large amount of energy stones to complete this task. If there are enough energy stones, we will need about 7 days to complete this." Gu Qijue now possessed supreme control over this Crystal Clan universe remnant. There was naturally no problem for him to carry this out. Gu Qijue was also very willing to invest in the Crystal Clan universe remnant. With a large wave of his hand, 1/5 of the energy stones he possessed were taken out. With so many energy stones, the mechanical life forms in this space could successfully complete the relocation. Once the Emperor Star, Shenhuang continent, and Outpost Star were all transferred to this space, Eve and Oldington would lead the Crystal Clan's mechanical life forms in production. The people of the Infinite Empire would be responsible for sales and all other matters. As for him, he could concentrate on cultivating his own armed forces in this barren land. The destruction of the Crystal Clan universe gave Gu Qijue a sense of urgency. That was to quickly complete the great unification of the current universe. Then, everyone would pool their wisdom and thoroughly study how to prevent the current universe from dying by heat death, or how to extend the universe's lifespan. One thing was certain: going to the underworld to erase everyone named Yu would definitely be useless. After finalizing the discussion with Eve and Oldington, Gu Qijue left the Crystal Clan universe remnant and contacted Tian Li. He temporarily did not plan to tell anyone anything related to the Crystal Clan. He alone needed to know this news. Tian Li quickly answered the communication and then said with some surprise, "Your Excellency, the head of state, why did you go to the Huenlin star cluster?" He was clearly able to see Gu Qijue's coordinates, which was why he knew Gu Qijue was in the Huanlin star cluster. Locating and teleporting to star clusters was also Gu Qijue's trump card, so he hadn't told anyone else. Gu Qijue did not answer Tian Li's question but instead said, "Tian Li, I found a very stable alternate dimension in the Huanlin star cluster. I plan to transfer the Emperor star, Shenhuang continent and outpost star entirely into this alternate dimension. What are your thoughts?" Hearing this, Tian Li was extremely surprised. He quickly pressed, "Your Excellency, the head of state, what kind of alternate dimension is it? Is the spatial size of that alternate dimension really that large?" Gu Qijue affirmed, "It is a very safe and very stable alternate dimension, requiring a special entry method. No one else can freely enter or exit besides me. The spatial volume of this alternate dimension is enormous. It is virtually boundless and vast." He wasn't lying, after all. This alternate dimension was a universe remnant, so it was naturally incredibly vast. After receiving his affirmative answer, Tian Li said seriously, "If it is as Your Excellency, the head of state, says, then entering this alternate dimension certainly has benefits. The Emperor star, Shenhuang continent, and outpost star can all be transferred using spatial technology. This matter will require a large amount of resources and approximately 1 month to complete. Eve and Oldington only needed 7 days to complete the preparation work, but it would take at least a month for Gu Qijue to transfer all 3 of his territories into the Crystal Clan Universe Remnant. Gu Qijue decided immediately, "No matter. Let it be 1 month. Send me the resource list and immediately start preparing for this matter." Tian Li hadn't expected Gu Qijue to be so decisive and swift, but this was good. It showed that Gu Qijue was extremely optimistic about that alternate dimension. 329 The Old Fox's support. 2 options. Tian Li and Gu Qijue had been working together for a long time. Gu Qijue understood him very well, and he also understood Gu Qijue very well. If there wasn't a profit to be made, Gu Qijue wouldn't have made such a decisive decision. After handling matters with Eve and Tian Li, Gu Qijue then discussed the matter with Vice Head of State Dai Qi, Jai Tianyu, and others. There was no need to say too much to Dai Qi and the others, Dai Qi, Jai Tianyu, and the rest had sufficient trust in him. After he informed them of his plans for relocation, everyone immediately began to implement it. Only after everything was settled did Gu Qijue contact the operations department of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster. However, by the time he contacted the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster's operations department, he had already returned to Blackstone Base. He did not intend to let the higher-ups of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster know about the positioning teleportation star chart. Although Gu Qijue contacted the operations department, it was Vice Head of State Han Sen who spoke with him. Han Sen felt that Gu Qijue's act of striking out on his own was disingenuous, and the actions of Head of State Salisbury and others were also disingenuous. So, when Gu Qijue communicated with the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster's operations department, he intercepted the communication and spoke with Gu Qijue personally. Gu Qijue hadn't expected it to be Vice Head of State Han Sen on the call. After a slight surprise, he politely said, "Your Excellency, Vice Head of State." "Hello?" Gu Qijue still had a good impression of Han Sen compared to other high-ranking officials of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster. This one was easier to talk to, more generous, and more willing to offer him benefits. In Han Sen's office, Han Sen picked up his coffee and took a sip. Then he looked at Commander Gu Qijue and said, "Commander Gu Qijue, let's be frank. The higher-ups of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster are very dissatisfied with your previous application. Of course, since things have reached this point, we can now discuss some practical matters. I can offer you the greatest possible assistance in my private capacity." Vice Head of State Han Sen stopped there, waiting for Gu Qijue to respond. Although Gu Qijue had discovered the Crystal Clan Universe Remnant and had a foundation for survival, he was now strong enough to stand on his own. However, he did not intend to refuse Vice Head of State Han Sen's goodwill. Although he was an E-rank universe-level expert and the dominator of the Desolate Star System, he knew exactly how much he had to work with. The Desolate Star System was almost the most barren and resource-poor star system within the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster's territory. Among all E-rank universe-level experts, he had the shortest accumulation period. Others had accumulated for countless years to become E-rank universe-level experts. He, on the other hand, had advanced rapidly and aggressively, becoming an E-rank universe-level expert in a very short time. Gu Qijue pondered for a moment, then said to Vice Head of State Han Sen, "Your Excellency, Vice Head of State, I need a large amount of resources." As for my reciprocation to your excellency, Vice Head of State, I need to know what you require of me before I can give a definitive answer. Han Sen nodded in satisfaction upon hearing Gu Qijue's words. He wasn't playing games with Gu Qijue, he was prepared to offer genuine financial support. Of course. He also hoped that Gu Qijue wouldn't play any tricks with him. After Gu Qijue finished speaking, he said, I hope you can take my eldest son and develop together. Whatever your infinite empire or infinite legion develops into, his forces must achieve the same level of development. Translated. Han Sen's words meant for Gu Qijue to take young Master Han and grow stronger together. Although Gu Qijue wasn't required to split half the benefits with young Master Han. But whatever Gu Qijue possessed, young Master Han should also possess. Gu Qijue pondered for a moment, then shook his head. This might not be possible. His development relied on the infinite engine, on numerous talents like Tian Li, and on the Crystal Clan universe remnant. These things were irreplaceable. How could he possibly allow young Master Han to have the same development as him? Vice Head of State Han Sen was not as easy to talk to this time as he had been before. He smiled. That's your problem. If you can solve it, I can support you to the greatest extent. Of course, there's another way. I can marry one of my daughters to you, but she must become the mistress of the infinite empire, and your children must become the next inheritors of the infinite empire. Gu Qijue was not prepared to agree to either of the two demands Han Sen put forward this time, although he very much wanted Vice Head of State Han Sen's support. The other party's demands were a bit excessive. However, Gu Qijue quickly thought of a feasible solution. He could develop his forces in the Huanlin star cluster to the greatest extent possible. Then, based on his development achievements in the Huanlin star cluster, he could replicate a copy for young Master Han. This way, he could demand resources from Vice Head of State Han Sen. These materials and energy stones would all be sent to the Crystal Clan mechanical lifeforms for production and creation. Some of the results of the Crystal Clan mechanical lifeforms' production and creation could then be brought to the outside world, duplicated to create a false prosperity. As long as this report satisfied Vice Head of State Han Sen, he could continue to receive support. This matter was clearly feasible. The only question was what kind of person young Master Han was and how easy he would be to fool. After careful consideration, Gu Qijue said to Vice Head of State Han Sen, Your Excellency, Vice Head of State, I can try the first plan. Han Sen was not at all surprised by Gu Qijue's words. A person who wants to create an earth-shattering, magnificent career needs both ability and resources. If Gu Qijue had both ability and resources, then there would be nothing for him to do. Now, Gu Qijue's abilities were extraordinary, but he had a shortage of resources. So of course he could invest. Moreover, not only did Gu Qijue need him, but he also needed Gu Qijue. The great ship of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster might sink at any time. He had to secure more reliable fallback options for himself and his family. Allowing Han Yiming to go with Gu Qijue to develop in the Huanlin Star Cluster was, in his opinion, a very good investment. The cooperation between Gu Qijue and Vice Head of State Han Sen was unknown to others. After the two parties reached an agreement, Han Yiming, the young master of Vice Head of State Han Sen's family, also arrived at Blackstone Base. When Gu Qijue saw Han Yiming, he felt that the guy's name was wrong. Because this young master Han Yiming had a slow and gentle temperament, with his personality, he probably wouldn't be able to do anything astonishing. However, Gu Qijue didn't make a judgment based solely on appearances. Upon seeing Han Yiming, he also issued an instruction to the Infinite Engine. Collect and organize all intelligence related to Han Yiming. After he issued the command, the Infinite Engine immediately began to work. All information related to Han Yiming was quickly organized and analyzed. 330, Expedition to the Blue Planet Cluster, the imposters. The efficiency of the Infinite Engine was extremely high. It didn't take long for Gu Qijue to gain a significant understanding of this young master. Han Yiming, they say a tiger father doesn't beget a dog son, but this young master Han Yiming has been an out-and-out good-natured person since childhood. He lacked any of Vice Premier Hansen's cunning and deceit. Instead, he was an honest man. When Han Yiming saw Gu Qijue, he was extremely polite. Hello, Commander Gu, I am Han Yiming. In the time ahead, I will fully cooperate with Commander Gu's arrangements. Not only did Han Yiming have an excellent personality and was an honest man, but his strength was also formidable. He was an E-rank cosmic-level peak expert, possessing considerable combat power, at least so far. Gu Qijue held no ill will toward this young Master Han. He just didn't know if the other party was a master of disguise or if this was his true nature. After Han Yiming arrived, Gu Qijue, along with him and the Blackstone Legion, departed for the Huanlin Star Cluster. The Blackstone Legion was originally just a conventional combat unit, but under Gu Qijue's tutelage, it had become an elite force. Normally, the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster would not allow Gu Qijue to take the Blackstone Legion to pioneer the Huanlin Star Cluster. However, Gu Qijue had reached an agreement with Vice Premier Hansen. If he took the Blackstone Legion away, Vice Premier Hansen would naturally mediate and explain the situation for him. He didn't know how Vice Premier Hansen managed to pull this off, but as long as he could take the Blackstone Legion, that was enough. Even though Gu Qijue already enjoyed extremely high prestige within the Blackstone Legion, when they learned everyone was heading to the Huanlin Star Cluster to be stationed, many still felt resistant and deeply uneasy. Gu Qijue naturally sensed this emotional state among the members of the Blackstone Legion. Therefore, after traveling for some time, he ordered the fleet to stop. At the same time, his voice echoed throughout the many starships of the Blackstone Legion. I am the commander of the Blackstone Legion. Gu Qijue, the Blackstone Legion has achieved great glory in the past, but all the battles we participated in were completed within the territory of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster. This means we would receive aid from the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster. After heading to the Huanlin Star Cluster, although we will still be members of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster, the distance between the two places is vast. We cannot quickly obtain aid from the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster. In many cases, everything must rely on ourselves. The path ahead will be extremely difficult. If some warriors wish to leave, they are free to do so. All warriors who wish to leave may now depart. Gu Qijue had done the exact same thing the first time he led the Blackstone Legion into battle. Those who left the Blackstone Legion regretted it deeply. Under Gu Qijue's command, the Blackstone Legion soared, directly entering the ranks of the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster's elite forces. Their battle achievements astonished the entire Star Cluster Alliance. Therefore, when Gu Qijue spoke similar words this time, the expressions of many members of the Blackstone Legion were very strange. Since Gu Qijue became the commander of the Blackstone Legion, not every decision he made was understood by everyone. But afterward, every decision he made proved to be correct. This led the veterans of the Blackstone Legion to solidify their confidence, ready to follow Gu Qijue all the way to the end. Originally, they were just members of a conventional combat unit. To put it more bluntly, they were just cannon fodder. If it weren't for Gu Qijue, they would not have reached this point today, and if they wanted further development, their only choice was to firmly follow Gu Qijue. Meanwhile, those who wanted to slip away faced the most difficult choice of their lives. Continuing to follow Gu Qijue to pioneer the Huanlin Star Cluster might mean having no future. However, Gu Qijue had done many unexpected things in the past. This time, he might once again lead the Blackstone Legion members to achieve greater development in the Huanlin Star Cluster as well. After struggling for a moment, everyone ultimately made a relatively cautious decision. Following Gu Qijue might bring benefits, but it might also cost them their lives. Given this, it was better to quit while they were ahead. Out of the 10 million-plus combat troops of the Blackstone Legion, approximately 800 people ultimately chose to leave. Often, the truth is held by the minority. But this time, these brothers were unlucky. A chance to soar to success was placed before them, yet they failed to seize it. Gu Qijue was also somewhat surprised that only a little over 800 people left. He had originally thought many people would be unwilling to follow him to pioneer the Huanlin Star Cluster, never expecting that only these few would choose to depart. Another person was equally surprised, and this person was none other than Han Yiming. Han Yiming was a good-natured person, an honest man, someone like him, if he hadn't been born into the family of Vice Head of State Hansen, might have been devoured until not even bones remained. Yet, not only did he not encounter any setbacks in his life, he also became an E-rank universe-level expert at a young age, which speaks volumes. The reason for this was that beneath his honest and kind facade lay a clever and insightful mind. He knew exactly what matters could be completely ignored and what things could be generously given to others, and what matters could not be conceded even a single step. Those latter things were incredibly important to his own self-interest. He not only understood these principles very early on, but he could execute them flawlessly. Therefore, many people only saw this young Master Han as a great person. Unaware that sacrificing small gains implies a grand scheme, Han Yiming was completely indifferent to petty favors and insignificant gains. This was entirely because he was only interested in enormous benefits and advantages. The shrewd and cunning Vice Premier Hansen sent Han Yiming to Gu Qijue's side. This was also because he had already seen that his eldest son surpassed him and would achieve greater things in the future. However, his eldest son still lacked certain qualities, talents that Gu Qijue happened to possess completely. Thus, Han Yiming could learn and grow well by Gu Qijue's side. Han Yiming had just been taught a lesson by Gu Qijue this time. He hadn't expected that under such circumstances. The members of the Blackstone Legion would still be willing to follow Gu Qijue. This made him attach even greater importance to Gu Qijue in his heart. He needed to carefully observe exactly how Gu Qijue managed to quickly gain such prestige within the Blackstone Legion. Gu Qijue still didn't know at this moment that his suspicions about Han Yiming were correct. Everything about Han Yiming on the surface was what he wanted outsiders to see. In reality, he was an enhanced version of Old Fox Han. Traveling from the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster to the Huanlin Star Cluster required not only warp jumps, but also numerous ultra-long-distance transmissions between various star clusters. Although it was quite troublesome, Gu Qijue and Han Yiming did not encounter any difficulties throughout the journey. 331. Reverse engineering begins. Golden Lion undergoes upgrade and renovation. The Huanlin Star Cluster was once a star cluster-level civilization, but now it has become a barren land. Many places in the Huanlin Star Cluster have turned into ruins. The destructive power of the Klein people is terrifying. Within a very short time, the Azure Star Cluster civilization was utterly destroyed. Of course, Rome wasn't built in a day. The Azure Star Cluster civilization had bad luck. The Klein people initially designated this place as a strategic target, when the Star Cluster Alliance and the Klein people were at war. The cunning Klein people were already planning their invasion of the Huanlin Star Cluster. They did nothing until they acted, and when they did, it was earth-shattering. In a very short time, the Huanlin Star Cluster was completely different from what it once was. The once oil-rich Huanlin Star Cluster now has virtually no energy mines left, although this place has become a ruin. Precisely because it became a ruin, it gained a certain degree of safety. As long as the benefits are not proportionate to the costs, the Klein people will not attack this place. Although various forces of the Star Cluster Alliance have competed and developed here, however, none of them brought a large amount of supplies. Currently, everyone is unsure whether the Klein people will make a comeback. Given this, they certainly couldn't gamble too many resources on this place. After Gu Qijue and Han Yiming arrived here with the Blackstone Legion, they began constructing the Blackstone base. Not long after, Han Yiming's direct combat unit arrived. Young Master Han's direct combat unit is the Divine Light Legion, which is very elite. The Blackstone base and the Divine Light base formed a pincer formation, mutually guarding each other during construction. Gu Qijue originally thought that Han Yiming would have a lot of things to do after arriving at the Huanlin Star Cluster. After actually arriving here, he realized that he had underestimated this young Master Han. After Han Yiming arrived at the Huanlin Star Cluster, he didn't give him anything to do. While the Blackstone Legion was building its base, he also had the Divine Light Legion build a defensive base. Beyond that, there was no other action. It seems that Han Yiming is at least not a profligate son, but rather has some capability. Gu Qijue didn't pay too much attention to Han Yiming. For a long time to come, the other party should be his ally, so he didn't need to consider how to deal with Han Yiming. Moreover, if he dealt with Han Yiming, would he still want the continuous assistance from Vice Premier Hansen? What Gu Qijue was currently focused on were the other forces on this planet and around it. At the same time, the movements of the Klein people's combat units were also a key focus for him. Judging from the reactions of all parties, his initial judgment was correct. After the Klein people harvested all the resources of the Huanlin Star Cluster, there was basically no possibility of them returning. The Huanlin Star Cluster had completely lost its value to the Klein people, although many Star Cluster Alliance combat units were stationed on the Huanlin Star Cluster. However, these combat units were merely a handful, posing no danger to the Klein people. Under such circumstances, the Klein people naturally would not take action against the people on the Huanlin Star Cluster. Although the Blackstone Legion is highly efficient, it will still take some time for them to finish constructing the Blackstone base. During this period, he planned to go out and take a look. Know yourself and your enemy, and you will never be defeated. No matter what he plans to do here next, he should first understand the surrounding situation clearly. Gu Qijue didn't leave directly, but first went to find Han Yiming. Brother Han, do you want to go out and take a look? Han Yiming shook his head upon hearing this. Chief Gu, I won't be going. After you've looked, if you discover anything, don't forget to let me know. Gu Qijue nodded slightly. It was best if Han Yiming didn't go. With Han Yiming by his side, there were many trump cards he couldn't easily use. This time, Gu Qijue didn't bring Han Yiming along, but he did bring the Bone Prison Hound. Currently, the Klein people have begun attacking several star cluster-level civilizations neighboring the Huanlin star cluster. The places Gu Qijue is going to visit this time are these star cluster-level civilizations. After the Klein people swiftly annihilated the Huanlin star cluster, all surrounding star cluster-level civilizations became highly vigilant. They engaged in fierce battles with the Klein people on multiple fronts, and so far, the situation remains a stalemate. Although the Golden Lion King did not leave anything in the Huanlin star cluster, he did leave treasures in other star clusters. This time, Gu Qijue appeared to be setting off alone, but in reality, he brought an elite combat unit with him. His 3,000 mechanical golden lions would certainly shine brightly on many battlefields. The only pity was that these mechanical golden lions could not grow. Gu Qijue is already an E-rank universe-level expert, yet many mechanical golden lions are still F-rank cosmic level. However, Gu Qijue suddenly thought of a very important matter. Previously, the Infinite Engine could not perform reverse engineering or upgrade the mechanical golden lions. That was because the technology contained within the mechanical golden lions was also very cutting edge. The situation is different now. His Infinite Engine has been updated and upgraded. The updated and upgraded Infinite Engine is clearly not comparable to its original state. Gu Qijue didn't hesitate and immediately gave it a try. Perform reverse engineering and upgrade the mechanical golden lions. The command was given, and the Infinite Engine immediately executed it. Reverse engineering initiated, comprehensive scanning and analysis of mechanical golden lions in progress. Please wait. Scanning and analysis complete. Upgrade available. Simulating upgrade plan, please wait. Upgrade plan complete, please review. After the Infinite Engine upgrade, it was indeed different from before. Things that couldn't be handled before can now be easily managed by the Infinite Engine. Gu Qijue immediately began to examine the upgrade plan provided by the Infinite Engine. After a brief look, he felt a headache coming on. These mechanical golden lions are very powerful, but there's a reason for their strong combat capabilities. The cost of one mechanical golden lion is higher than that of an F-rank peak cosmic level expert. Whether he wanted to produce more mechanical golden lions or upgrade the existing ones, it would be extremely resource-intensive. The Crystal Clan Universe Remnant is a major consumer of resources. Maintaining these mechanical golden lions also consumes a lot of resources. Building mechanical golden lions requires a large amount of top-tier materials and energy stones. Afterward, deploying mechanical golden lions in combat, maintaining them, and upgrading them all require vast resources. Without sufficient financial resources, it's simply impossible to manage. Gu Qijue looked at the upgrade plan, then at the resources stocked in the warehouse. Ultimately, he made up his mind. Proceed with the upgrade. 332. The Flower Moon Star Cluster is civilized, and its beautiful leader is. Gu Qijue was extremely wealthy when he presided over Emperor Star and swept across Shenhuang continent. At that time, he had so many resources and good things that he couldn't use them all. However, after entering the Great Universe Era and the Interstellar Hegemony Era, the situation completely changed. His speed in acquiring resources was still astonishing, but the rate at which his resources were consumed was also terrifying. The glorious sight of resources piled up like mountains in the Infinite Engine's spatial warehouse was a thing of the past. While he had the Infinite Engine upgrade and modify the mechanical golden lions, he himself used a positioning teleportation star chart to travel to the Gu star cluster civilization. The Gu star cluster civilization is a star cluster-level civilization with a long history and average strength. There's a reason why the Gu star cluster civilization has been able to endure through the long river of time. That is, the Gu star cluster civilization produces beauties. This is truly a place blessed with outstanding people and natural beauty. Any woman from here, taken to another star cluster-level civilization, would be considered a beauty, and they are natural beauties, not those who have undergone 3,000 cuts. Other members of the Star Cluster Alliance, of course, had many designs on the Gu star cluster civilization, but with all parties mutually restraining each other, no single one was able to annex the Gu star cluster civilization. The Gu star cluster civilization has been having a very difficult time recently. The 50 members of the Star Cluster Alliance are all normal. They all appreciate the beauties of the Gu Qijue Star Cluster civilization. The Klein people are different. They always insist that beauties are meant to be cherished. So they fight the Gu Qijue Star Cluster's combat troops to the death. When the Gu Qijue Star Cluster civilizations, combat troops encounter other enemies. 9 out of 10 times they are captured alive. Regardless of the eventual outcome, at least there's a chance to live. And relying on their beauty, graceful figures, and special physiques that aid in cultivation, they often thrive. This time, encountering the Klein people, these older sisters, younger sisters, and young aunts were completely at a loss. When Gu Qijue arrived at the Gu Qijue Star Cluster, he saw that the situation there was very bad. However, where there is a crouching dragon, there must be a fledgling phoenix. Where there is a pleasant goat, there must be a Feiyong. Other Star Cluster civilizations had not reacted much yet. The combat troops of the greedy Wolf Star Cluster civilization had already continuously entered the Gu Qijue Star Cluster. Gu Qijue flew through the Gu Qijue Star Cluster, feeling a mix of amusement and exasperation. Many of the older and younger sisters in the Gu Qijue Star Cluster civilizations, combat troops, had been brought to tears by the Klein people. Facing this group of brutes who had no concept of cherishing beauty, it was incredibly difficult for them to return alive from the battlefield. Although the current plight of the Gu Qijue Star Cluster civilization was utterly miserable, Gu Qijue had no intention of staying to meddle. He wasn't planning to stay, but the people of the Gu Qijue Star Cluster wanted him to. It was understandable that they hadn't thought of the renowned commander of the Blackstone Legion, Gu Qijue, before. After some people discovered a figure who resembled Gu Qijue and definitively confirmed his identity, Hua Linglong, one of the heads of the Gu Qijue Star Cluster's combat department, personally came to find Gu Qijue. The Gu Qijue Star Cluster civilization, having long lived in a greenhouse, was not very skilled in combat. Gu Qijue was capable of training a motley crew into a fierce, tiger-like army in a very short time, and leading the Blackstone Legion, he achieved victory in every battle, sweeping away all opposition. Clearly, Gu Qijue was precisely the talent the Gu Qijue Star Cluster civilization most needed at the moment. Although Gu Qijue already had many beautiful wives, when Hua Linglong appeared, he couldn't help but take a few extra glances. Some beauties are judged by their faces, some by their legs, and some by their unattainable, snow-capped peaks. Hua Linglong was different. Her entire being was a landscape, beautiful everywhere. After Hua Linglong appeared, she also unceremoniously spread her arms and blocked the rapidly flying Gu Qijue. If Gu Qijue had continued flying, he would have known the taste of soft, fragrant jade. However, Gu Qijue didn't do that. He stopped and asked, "What can I do for you?" He had only taken a few extra glances at Hua Linglong just now. The Gu Qijue Star Cluster civilization didn't have a rule against looking at beauties. Did it? Hua Linglong completely ignored Gu Qijue's gaze and instead spoke very directly. "If you can help the Gu Qijue Star Cluster train a combat force comparable to the Blackstone Legion and provide us with the training data, then whatever your request, as long as it's not too outrageous, the Gu Qijue Star Cluster civilization can agree to it." Extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. The Gu Qijue Star Cluster civilization was now at a moment of life and death, so they couldn't be too particular. Even if Gu Qijue was from the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster civilization, since he had come to the Gu Qijue Star Cluster civilization, there should be no problem in borrowing him. Right? Hua Linglong's words somewhat startled Gu Qijue. He hadn't expected Hua Linglong to stop him for such a purpose. He mischievously looked her up and down, then half-jokingly said, "Can even that request be granted?" This time, before Hua Linglong could speak, Feiyong had already erupted like a volcano. Boom! A cone of ice suddenly shot down from above, streaking across the sky. But Gu Qijue easily dodged it. The Gu Qijue Star Cluster has 10 great beauties, and this Hua Linglong, beautiful in every aspect, was one of them. Commander Murong Zifeng of the Greedy Wolf Star Cluster had long regarded this great beauty, Hua Linglong, as his exclusive possession. Just now, when Hua Linglong went to speak with Gu Qijue, Murong Zifeng was already very angry. Although Hua Linglong wasn't his woman yet, in Murong Zifeng's eyes, it was only a matter of time. Given that, he naturally had to teach Gu Qijue a lesson. Originally, Hua Linglong was also a bit annoyed by Gu Qijue's teasing, because the benefits she spoke of were material benefits, not involving herself. However, Hua Linglong disliked Murong Zifeng even more. Gu Qijue merely teased her a few words, while Murong Zifeng relentlessly pestered her. Not only that, but the other party had also unilaterally declared that she was already his woman. causing her immense distress. Although the greedy Wolf Star Cluster's combat troops were the first to arrive to support the Gu Star Cluster. After they arrived, they had already harmed many beautiful women of the Gu Star Cluster. Every warrior of the greedy Wolf Star Cluster had at least had romantic encounters with 2 or even more beauties from the Gu Star Cluster. In short, their intentions were not pure. Hua Linglong thought for a moment and decided to go all out. She immediately said to Gu Qijue, "If you can accomplish what I just said, you can do anything you want to me." Coming from such a peerless beauty like Hua Linglong, these words had immense destructive power. Gu Qijue had originally only intended to retrieve the treasure trove that the Golden Lion King had hidden in the Gu Star Cluster, and not meddle in other affairs. But now he was seriously considering whether he should bring a wife back from this trip. 333, instant kill, ransom of tens of millions of D-grade energy stones. Hua Linglong's peerless beauty made it easy for Gu Qijue to make this decision. Gu Qijue didn't hesitate at all, he decided to go for it. He looked at Hua Linglong and asked, "You won't go back on your word, will you?" Hua Linglong shook her head. Once a word is spoken, it's like white dye on black cloth. As she finished speaking, Commander Murong Xiefeng also arrived. Flying through the air, Murong Xiefeng's previous aerial attack hadn't managed to do anything to Gu Qijue, but he had heard Gu Qijue and Hua Linglong's conversation in its entirety. His gaze towards Gu Qijue was filled with killing intent. However, he still suppressed it and didn't make a move. Instead, he asked, "Do you know who I am?" Since Murong Xiefeng had brazenly attacked him earlier, Gu Qijue wasn't planning on letting this guy off easy. Now that Murong Xiefeng had come looking for trouble himself, Gu Qijue was even less inclined to be polite. He raised a finger and pointed at the bone prison hound beside him, asking, "Do you know what breed of dog this is?" This remark was extremely insulting. After all, Murong Xiefeng had asked Gu Qijue if he knew who he was. Gu Qijue's indirect reply was, "I don't need to know what kind of dog you are." As the young master of the greedy Wolf Star Cluster Civilization's vice head of state, how could Murong Xiefeng continue to joke around with Gu Qijue? Gu Qijue's humiliation of him had already sealed his fate. Whoosh! Murong Xiefeng didn't hold back in the slightest. He raised his hand, and a frost sword instantly appeared in his grasp. Hua Linglong hadn't expected Gu Qijue to show Murong Xiefeng no face at all. However, she still didn't want the two of them to fight here, so she could only speak up. "Don't be impulsive. I can notify the Star Cluster Vice Head of State to come and resolve your misunderstanding." Hua Linglong had given Gu Qijue and Murong Xiefeng enough face, directly preparing to invite a Vice Head of State from the Gu Star Cluster to act as a mediator. However, Murong Xiefeng clearly wasn't prepared to give the Gu Star Cluster any face. Without another word, he suddenly launched an attack. The frost sword in his hand, imbued with terrifying power, slashed directly towards Gu Qijue. Hua Linglong was completely speechless when she saw this. She instantly conjured an energy shield, blocking in front of Gu Qijue. Hua Linglong's command ability might not be great, but her combat power was not bad. Murong Xiefeng's sword strike couldn't do anything to her. Boom! When the terrifying sword light fell, the energy shield Hua Linglong had conjured merely rippled slightly. However, Hua Linglong hadn't expected that not only was Murong Xiefeng short-tempered, but Gu Qijue also had quite a temper. Earlier, when Gu Qijue was talking to Hua Linglong, Murong Xiefeng had ambushed him. Now, without a word, he suddenly attacked again. He truly had a death wish. Roar! A heaven-shaking dragon roar suddenly erupted at this moment. Suddenly, Gu Qijue's form underwent an extremely rapid transformation. He first entered the second combat form, half-dragon transformation, and then from half-dragon transformation, he entered full dragon transformation. This wasn't all. As terrifying dragon might swept out in all directions, he directly entered the fourth combat form, Blood Dragon God form. Crack! D-rank cosmic level power swept in all directions at this moment. Murong Xiefeng was clutched in Gu Qijue's hand, his throat constricted. Like a chick being squeezed, Murong Xiefeng was completely dumbfounded at this moment. He had originally thought that he could sweep and crush Gu Qijue within 10 rounds. After all, Gu Qijue's strength primarily lay in commanding large armies, not in being a reckless individual warrior. But he had clearly overestimated himself. In front of Gu Qijue, he couldn't even last a single exchange before being instantly killed. Gu Qijue knew that Murong Xiefeng had a significant background, but he was still prepared to crush the other party to death. Even if this was an ant, keeping it around was somewhat annoying. However, just as he had this thought, the infinite engine gave a prompt. Prompt: the target has a backup consciousness body. It is recommended to demand a ransom. Seeing this prompt, Gu Qijue was somewhat astonished. No wonder Murong Xiefeng was so arrogant. It turned out he had 2 or 3 lives. This didn't mean that if Murong Xiefeng's head was cut off, another one would grow back. Rather, his consciousness body had been backed up using extremely advanced technological means. Even if he killed Murong Xiefeng now, the other party wouldn't truly die, unless he could destroy the device storing Murong Xiefeng's backup consciousness body. Thinking of this, Gu Qijue temporarily abandoned the idea of crushing Murong Xiefeng to death. Moreover, the Infinite Engine's suggestion this time was excellent. He was currently very short on resources. The life of the young master of the greedy Wolf Star Cluster civilization's vice head of state must be very valuable. Gu Qijue immediately said to Murong Xiefeng, "Do you believe me when I say I'll take your dog's life when I count to 3? Although Murong Xiefeng knew he wouldn't die. The device for backing up consciousness bodies was not developed by the greedy Wolf Star Cluster civilization and was extremely precious. That kind of device wasn't simply copying him, it truly gave him 2 lives. No matter how angry Murong Xiefeng was, he didn't want to casually use up one of his lives. Moreover, that was one of his most important trump cards, and it absolutely could not be used in this place. Even though he was beyond furious, Murong Xiefeng could only say coldly, "What do you want?" Gu Qijue casually said, "Give me 100 million D-rank energy stones, otherwise you can stay in the Gu star cluster forever." Upon hearing this, Murong Xiefeng was once again enraged. 100 million D-rank energy stones? Gu Qijue really had the nerve to ask for that much. It wasn't that he wasn't worth that price, but the greedy Wolf Star Cluster civilization would never agree to such a thing. Murong Xiefeng had been extremely arrogant and presumptuous before for 2 reasons. First, he wouldn't die, and second, he was confident he could defeat Gu Qijue. Now that he was a prisoner, he wasn't completely oblivious to the situation. He thought for a moment and said, 10 million D-rank energy stones. Not a single piece more. Gu Qijue's initial offer was actually an exorbitant asking price, meant to be negotiated down. If he could get 1,000,000 D-rank energy stones, he would actually be very satisfied. 1,000,000 D-rank energy stones was equivalent to 100 million E-rank energy stones and 10 billion F-rank energy stones. This was not a small sum, but an astronomical amount of energy stones. But he hadn't expected Murong Xiefeng to offer the sky-high price of 10 million D-rank energy stones. He had been wandering the universe for so long, and he had never, at any point, possessed so many energy stones. While delighted, Gu Qijue was also worried that Murong Xiefeng might be playing tricks. What if the other party sent a C-rank cosmic-level expert from the greedy Wolf Star Cluster to deliver those energy stones? If they dared to send them, he wouldn't dare to accept them, even with all his trump cards. He could only contend with a D-rank cosmic-level expert, something Gu Qijue hadn't expected happen again. Murong Xiefeng was worried that Gu Qijue might impulsively crush him to death. He directly took off the spatial storage device around his neck and said, "There are 10 million D-rank energy stones in here. Just give me a straight answer if it's acceptable." 334, Moonlight Legion, Exclusive Training Program. What Gu Qijue was worried about before was Murong Xiefeng playing tricks with the ransom. If a C-rank cosmic-level expert from the greedy Wolf Star Cluster civilization came, he would be in trouble, but he really didn't expect Murong Xiefeng to have 10 million D-rank energy stones on him. This made him have an idea. In the future, he could specifically target profligate young masters like Murong Xiefeng. Resources in their hands don't have much use. Give him the resources, and he will use them to accelerate the revival of the Crystal Clan Universe Remnant. If so, it would obviously be beneficial to him and the entire Star Cluster Alliance. Gu Qijue didn't hesitate. After Murong Xiefeng took out 10 million D-rank energy stones, he accepted them decisively and released the person without fuss. Scram! Gu Qijue waved his hand, throwing Murong Xiefeng out. Then, he quickly exited the Blood Dragon God state and returned to his second combat form. Murong Xiefeng's gaze towards Gu Qijue was extremely venomous, but at this moment, he didn't dare to stay. After a frigid glance at Gu Qijue, he shattered the Void Realm and left. Gu Qijue didn't say anything, but he issued an instruction to the Infinite Engine with his consciousness. Monitor Murong Xiefeng closely. Upon hearing the instruction, the Infinite Engine immediately began its monitoring task on Murong Xiefeng. Henceforth, all interactions between Murong Xiefeng and any smart devices will be closely recorded by the Infinite Engine. Like Murong Xiefeng, Hua Linglong had not known before that Gu Qijue had the blood dragon god as a trump card. She had been a bit worried that Gu Qijue would suffer a loss at Murong Zifeng's hands. She never expected that Gu Qijue would instantly kill Murong Zifeng in one move. Gu Qijue was in an excellent mood at this moment. 10 million D-rank energy stones were an astronomical amount of resources for him. 10 million D-rank energy stones are equivalent to 1 billion E-rank energy stones, let alone 1 billion E-rank energy stones. Even if he invested 100 million E-rank energy stones into the Crystal Clan Universe Remnant, he would still get a large output. Murong Zifeng. This profligate young master from the greedy Wolf Star Cluster civilization was simply a godsend for him. With so many resources, many things could be carried out smoothly. After Murong Zifeng left dejectedly, Hua Linglong looked at Gu Qijue with great anticipation and said, "Lord Gu Qijue, how long will it take you to help our Hu Star Cluster civilization assemble a team comparable to the Blackstone Legion?" Gu Qijue pondered for a moment, then asked, "What kind of combat troops is the Hu Star Cluster civilization prepared to give me for training?" Hua Linglong thought for a moment and said, "Can we select soldiers from the Hu Star Cluster civilization's regular combat forces?" Gu Qijue nodded. "Yes. Just select the people and bring them to me." He planned to become an ally of the Hu Star Cluster civilization. The Hu Star Cluster civilization is relatively close to the Crystal Clan Universe Remnant, as well as the Blackstone base and the Divine Light base. Although he could get support from the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster, and even from Vice Premier Hansen within the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster. This did not prevent him from having the Hu Star Cluster civilization as an ally. While Gu Qijue was thinking this, Hua Linglong had already gone to prepare quickly. Overall, the comprehensive strength of the Hu Star Cluster civilization is not weak. It's just that they are not very good at Legion warfare and lack command-type talents. Gu Qijue didn't wait too long before Hua Linglong brought 10 million regular combat troops before him and arranged a base for him. This base would henceforth be exclusively used by him to train this combat force originating from the Hu Star Cluster. With everyone assembled, Gu Qijue began to examine the situation of this regular combat force. He didn't simply perceive with mental energy, but instead said to the Infinite Engine, "Analyze the situation of this combat force and formulate several training plans." This kind of task, for the Infinite Engine, was naturally a piece of cake. As soon as Gu Qijue finished speaking, the Infinite Engine immediately began to execute the task. Data collection and analysis in progress. Please wait, data collection complete, data analysis complete, starting to formulate training plans. Please wait, Legion training plan formulation complete. Do you want to formulate individual training plans? The so-called individual training plan is to provide a corresponding training plan for each soldier in the Legion, to allow every soldier in the Legion to improve, thereby elevating the overall Legion. Not only that, but the entire Legion will also undergo some training. Once every soldier in the Legion, as well as the overall standard of the Legion, has improved, Gu Qijue will also equip this Legion with corresponding weapons. If Gu Qijue had been parachuted in before to train this combat force, many people would have been unconvinced. But Gu Qijue had recently shown his skill, instantly killing Murong Zifeng with one move, which made all these soldiers exceptionally obedient. Even Murong Zifeng was no match for Gu Qijue. They were even less worth mentioning in front of Gu Qijue. At this moment, many who knew the history of the Blackstone Legion were somewhat expectant. The Blackstone Legion was able to achieve rapid improvement under Gu Qijue's command. After being trained by Gu Qijue, they should also be able to become an elite force. Gu Qijue was now wealthy and powerful, directly instructing the Infinite Engine to formulate individual training plans for every soldier. The Infinite Engine was clearly not single-threaded, nor dual-threaded. Simultaneously performing 10 million different computational tasks was just a piece of cake for the Infinite Engine. Hua Linglong and the Moonlight Legion were all staring at Gu Qijue at this moment. They were all waiting for Gu Qijue to give orders. Gu Qijue waited for a moment, and the Infinite Engine had everything ready. At this point, he said to the members of the Moonlight Legion, "Everyone, I am Gu Qijue, entrusted by the Hu Star Cluster Civilization and Your Excellency Hua Linglong. For the next period, I will conduct a series of comprehensive training for you, to enable you to increase your chances of survival and combat capability in the increasingly treacherous environment and more dangerous battlefields ahead. Now tell me, what is the name of your legion?" After Gu Qijue asked, everyone spoke in unison with loud voices. Moonlight Legion? Loud and clear voices and high-pitched loudspeakers are two completely different concepts. A loud and clear voice requires clear articulation, full vitality. Neither humble nor overbearing, rather than merely shouting at the top of one's lungs. Because the vocal pitch of carbon-based organisms has its limits. Even if one screams until their vocal cords break, they cannot compete with a high-pitched loudspeaker. Gu Qijue was certainly not deaf. He did not say that the sound of tens of thousands of people answering together was too quiet to hear, let alone tens of thousands of people. If one still finds the sound of dozens or hundreds of people speaking in unison too quiet to hear, at that point, one should consider getting a hearing aid. 335, Three-Phase Strategy, Legion Joint Operation. After all the warriors of the Moonlight Legion focused their attention, Gu Qijue continued to explain his next training plan. Everyone, my training plan for the Moonlight Legion is mainly divided into 3 parts. The first phase is to formulate corresponding training plans for each warrior of the Moonlight Legion. The second phase is to conduct overall comprehensive training for the Moonlight Legion. The third phase is to equip the Moonlight Legion with the most suitable weapons and equipment, and begin adaptive training. After all 3 phases of training are completed, I believe everyone here will be reborn and reach a higher level. Warriors of the Moonlight Legion, do you have confidence? Although everyone had great confidence in Gu Qijue, they didn't have much confidence in themselves. They might not be cut out for it. If they could truly be reborn and shine brightly, why had they remained unknown before? However, at this moment, everyone's answer was still, we have confidence. At least verbally, they still had to say they had confidence. What the final outcome would be, they did not know. Gu Qijue was very familiar with the situation of the Moonlight Legion members. Currently, most of the Moonlight Legion warriors clearly suffered from a severe lack of confidence. There was nothing that could be done about it. If a person succeeded more and failed less, they would become increasingly confident. Conversely, if one repeatedly fought and failed, even Zheng Guofan, known as the perfect man of ages, would be so disheartened as to want to jump into a lake. It is clear that continuous failure is a severe blow to people. If even a perfect man of ages is like this, what more ordinary people? Next, with the Moonlight Legion members feeling skeptical, they successively received training plans tailored for them. While Gu Qijue was training the warriors of the Moonlight Legion, Hua Linglong was always observing and learning from the side. But unfortunately, only Gu Qijue possessed the heaven-defying cheat, the infinite engine. It was very difficult, very troublesome, and even impossible for others to learn Gu Qijue's training methods. After receiving the training plans provided by Gu Qijue, the Moonlight Legion members began to train diligently. While they were training, Gu Qijue was also keeping an eye on Murong Xiefeng's situation. Murong Xiefeng did not act as Gu Qijue expected, bringing the powerhouses of the greedy Wolf Star Cluster civilization to seek revenge immediately. He didn't do this to let bygones be bygones, but rather to wait for an opportunity. After all, Gu Qijue was a prominent figure in the Vermilion Bird Star Cluster, the Huyu Star Cluster, and the Star Cluster Alliance. He was not in the right regarding this matter. If he were to bring the powerhouses of the greedy Wolf Star Cluster civilization to the Huyu Star Cluster civilization to confront Gu Qijue, he would most likely be the one to suffer in the